Right, it looks like it's 6 o'clock. So welcome everybody to the remote planning meeting. First of all, as I usually do, just a little bit of general housekeeping. I'm Councillor Margaret Glancy, Chair of Planning. And prior to this evening's meeting, we have been testing the technology, and I can confirm that the speakers are in attendance and can be heard. I can also confirm that I can see and or hear my fellow participating members here this evening. Those members are, if I go down the list, if I call you forward, please, members, if you can confirm that you can hear me and see me. Those members are Councillor Bindloss.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Chandler.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Faulkner.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Myself, yes, I can hear me. Councillor Hewson.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Higgins.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes. You're on mute, Councillor Holmes.
Right, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Posnett.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. And we have Councillor Pritchett, who is substitute for Councillor Wood.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Steadman.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much, everybody. We have a team of officers here this evening. We have Assistant Director for Strategic Planning and Regulatory Services, Jim Worley. Our Development Manager, Louise Parker, a member of the planning team, Jasmine Doughty. We also have our Legal and Governance Manager, Kieran Stockley, together with members from our Democratic Service team, Natasha Taylor and Catherine Richards. I think that's everybody. Members speaking, just to remind members, if you could please use your raise hand facility on your screen, and a member of the Democratic Service team, namely Natasha, will make a note and inform me accordingly if I haven't spotted it on the right-hand side of my screen. Members voting, please note a remote member participating in a vote will cast his or her vote as if participating in a recorded vote. I will ask members alphabetically for their vote, for, against, or abstain. All microphones will be unmuted whilst the vote is being recorded. Following the vote, all microphones will be returned to mute, and that is to reduce the background noise, which often happens. Thank you. Disruption to remote conferencing. I refer you to the remote meeting procedure rules, and that is in the event of a link failure for all members, I will call a short adjournment for up to 5 minutes. If the link cannot be re-established, and the meeting shall be adjourned to a later date. In the event of a link failure to individual members, the remote member will be deemed to have left the meeting at the point of failure of the equipment. And if the link cannot be re-established before the end of the meeting, then the presumption will be that the meeting should continue to deal with the items providing the meeting remains quorate. If there is disruption with a member's connectivity, I will ask Kieran Stockley to determine whether a member has heard enough of the debate to be able to lawfully vote depending on the particular circumstances and how much the member has missed. I'd be very grateful if members could please put your phones onto silent, and also please note that this meeting is being recorded and it's being live streamed. Thank you. Right, item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Wood, and we have, as I've said before, we have Councillor Pritchett, who's kindly agreed to substitute. The next item is minutes of the 6th of August. If we can confirm those minutes. I believe you had an amendment to the minutes, Councillor Higgins, from memory.
Yes. Cool. There's an echo.
There is, isn't there?
Yeah.
We can hear two of you.
Okay. I think that's gone now, has it, Chair?
Yes, it has. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. On the minutes in relation to the sum of the application, it doesn't say my comments that are on there. what I said in brief, but I will document it to officers, was that it was welcome to have the voluntary contribution to an affordable house, because the developer was not required to do so, and so thanks to that. And that where are we here? Yes, and in regards to emergency services, we had engaged with the local fire service, who had responded accordingly, and that objectors were concerned with the volume of traffic to the site, and in response to that, the applicant had reduced the number of houses from 12 to 2, so it was going to reduce the number of vehicle movements. I will send that to the officers of just some wording, and I will copy you in, Chair, if the committee accept that amendment.
Thank you very much. Bearing in mind that amendment requested by councillor Higgins, are we in agreement that these are an accurate record of the proceedings of the 6th of August? Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Higgins? And a second. You wish to propose? Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Steadman?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
You did too.
Right, we'll go through the list of councillors alphabetically to get your for, against or abstain. And the first one is Councillor Bindloss. You're on mute, Councillor Bindloss.
Yes, sorry. Abstain, Chair, as I was not at the meeting.
Okay. Councillor Brown.
Or
Thank you. Councillor Chandler.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Faulkner.
or
Thank you. Councillor Glancy for. Councillor Hewson.
for
Thank you. Councillor Higgins.
For.
Councillor Holmes.
I have had my hand up because actually Councillor Higgins didn't make it clear. He said 2, meaning that there were 2 less, but one is got the general public has got to know, and he didn't. He just said 2, not 10 instead of 12. I don't know whether you didn't pick that up, but that's why I put my hand up.
Oh, sorry, I didn't spot your hand raised.
No, it's all right, but you know, obviously, if everybody we want to know, it's exactly right, and that's what he actually said 2, as opposed to 10, meaning, you know, from 12 to 10, but he did say 2. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. That's all. I'm for it then, but I think we've got to write that really.
Yes, that's just a bit of clarification. So thank you for that.
All right.
Councillor Posnett.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Pritchett, you were not at the meeting, so I presume you're abstaining.
Not present, abstain, correct, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Steadman.
For, Chair.
Thank you. So eventually I will sign those minutes as amended by Councillor Higgins. One day we will get together so I can sign them. Now we move on to declarations of interest. I would just advise members to please note the content of the advice on members' interests. And if you think you have a personal, either non-pecuniary or pecuniary interest or bias, please state that now. Do we have any hands raised? Yes, we have Councillor Steadman.
Sorry, yes, on the first application, 19013024, land west of Main Street, Stallen, I will be representing on behalf of the village.
Thank you very much. And you will leave the meeting and go to the attendees area.
Of course.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Right. The next one is Councillor Posnett.
Thank you, Chair. Just my usual as a personal but non-pecuniary interest as a member of Leicestershire County Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, that's noted. Sorry for all this paper shuffling. I've got papers everywhere at the moment. We have 2 applications on the agenda this evening. The first one is 4.1, and that is 19 oblique. I think Councillor Stedman will be leaving the meeting now.
Yes, I'll confirm that I will just move Councillor
Yeah,
Stedman.
I'll give you time to move Councillor Stedman over then.
Thank you.
Before we go any further. Sorry, I am racing ahead this evening. Thank you.
Councillor Stedman has now moved to the attendees.
That's good. Thank you very much. Yes, so 4.1, 19/01302, full, land west of Main Street, Southern. And that encompasses demolition of agricultural buildings and the erection of 74 dwellings, together with access into the site from Main Street and open space, landscaping and drainage infrastructure. I'd invite the officers to address the committee and provide a report.
That would be me on this occasion.
It is
Thank
you,
Chair.
yes. Thank you.
Please, apologies. I've got some updating to do before we go through the content of the plans, so it's probably better without the plans displayed for a moment. Quite a number of updates. I know I threatened you with that at briefing on Monday, but I've found a way of editing them down, so it won't be quite so bad. Well, I say updates. The first thing I want to check with you, I guess more than anything, is the issue to do with Mrs. Leithborough's representation. She's speaking tonight, actually, in case anything gets missed, because they weren't late representations. They were perfectly in time, but they got bogged down in IT systems somewhere, and I managed to retrieve them on Friday and forwarded them to you all then, and to Councillor Pritchett when I heard he was joining us as well. And I just want to check they've safely arrived and you've all had time to consume and digest.
I can see
loads.
I have received it, so if we can just sort of indicate by physically putting our hand up, then we can confirm that we have received them.
Excellent.
I think that looks quite positive.
Yeah, we mustn't miss people's representation, so I'm pleased that catching up has worked. Okay, so proper updates. Since issuing the report last week, 24 further objections have been received from local residents. Very much the same points that have already been made in the by others and are therefore already appear in the report. But if I can draw out the highlights, please, just to let you know the things that are concerning people most. Many of these extra comments, like many of the originals, talk about concerns about access and traffic and the need for traffic calming on Mill Hill, and a specific request that this is prior to commencement of development, rather than, you'll have noticed from the conditions, a figure of 20 or any figure for that matter, because people would like it to manage construction traffic as well as resident traffic. Again, many commenting that the scale and density of the development is too large at 74 and 65 would be preferable. A good number of comments reiterating the point about detachment of the village, and therefore there would be a disjointed approach from this development compared to the community within the village. A number again of comments highlighting again about the grouping of affordable housing, how they're in two rather larger clusters than we ideally like to see. There are concerns there, and I use the words used in the letters about ghettoing and stigmatizing. That's the kind of language that's been used. There are continued concerns regarding flooding. I don't think anything new, but points that were already in the report being repeated several times over. A number of comments about the capacity of local services, and I'll come on to that in more detail anyway, because I have 106 updates as well. And comments regarding the bus service having changed recently in Stathern, and therefore the sustainability credentials, if that's the right word, of the whole location has moved on since the local plan was created and this site was allocated. And finally, but importantly, again, I think repeated points, but it shows how much people care about the impact on wildlife. So that's my kind of top 10 of what the recent submissions have said, on top of the 75 or whatever it was, that order of things that are summarised in the report. Further updates on section 106, and for this, if I can walk you through the report to paragraph 6.1 first, please, which is the LCC stuff. So LCC have revised their request, and it now for education, and it now rises to 513,000 from just under 500 previously.
Okay.
And that's made up of 306,000 in round figures for Statham Primary and 207,000 for Beaver Academy in Bottisford. Paragraph 6.5, there's a further representation. Oh, sorry, I've missed an important point. Those revised education contributions are readily accepted by the applicant, and you're hearing from him later anyway. At paragraph 6.5, the Village Hall, the War Memorial Institute, given their proper title, has repeated its argument that it considers the calculation of the contribution should be based on the growth of the village rather than the proportion of the village, which is how I've concluded in the report. And I'm pleased to say that with great reluctance, the applicant have said they are prepared to go with that methodology if it's a way of moving forward. Again, Mr. Longley can elaborate on that if when he speaks or through questions I've had. Moving on to paragraph 6.6. Again, good news. The applicants have confirmed they would meet the request for the bridge to Valebrook Road, which now has a revised value of £10,000. I think £20,000 was previously circulated, but it was confirmed at 10. And the applicant have agreed that if, and it's quite important, if you consider that it meets SIL regulation requirements, particularly under the criteria of necessary. So you're going to have a debate about connectivity later, I suspect, and this will be part of that. And finally, on 106, that the play equipment, also in paragraph 6.6, again, I suggested a proportionate approach is applicable here rather than them expecting the developers to pay for everything, because the whole village will benefit, and that seems to have been accepted. So that would be a 6,000 contribution to that request, and again the applicant have accepted that, which is good news. That's it in terms of updates, but if I can draw attention to a few points in the report, really because people have drawn a meaning from them that I didn't intend. So apology if it's my fault that the words aren't clear. So I'll have a go now at trying to explain what I'm trying to get over. So at paragraph 5.7.2 first, where we're talking about the new junction and visibility. The sentence there is to convey that the junction allows visibility of traffic approach from Valebrook, from Mill Hill, down the hill there. And the reason I'm pointing this out is that I've had some feedback that people were reading it to mean people travelling in that direction will be able to see the junction. Well, what I'm actually trying to say is people leaving the junction will be able to see the oncoming traffic and behave accordingly, basically. On traffic calming, there's been some, I think, conflation between the words that appear in paragraph 5.72 and the condition number 14. So the words at 572 are a direct quote from the Highways Authority about what they think could be achieved. But the words in paragraph recommended condition 14 are not constrained. It's very much more open-ended, and if we can do it between us, it will be a collaboration between applicant, ourselves, and the parish council. If between us we can design something more robust, and highways accept that, that's fine. We're not limited to that short menu that appears in 5.7.2. And I think we've all got aspirations that if we get to that stage, we can do better. The parish council mentioned that they have evidence of speeding in the village already. They haven't presented this to me, but it came alongside a comment that reacted to my words in the report that said speeds are low in the village centre, which my own experience, I mean, I would say in my experience, it's been so slow that the stationary at times, but I don't go every day and locals know better. I've invited it, but haven't seen it yet. I've been away, as you know, so it may be residing in my inbox. Just a concern arising from that, which is if the speeding issues already exist, I'm not sure that it doesn't help the case to require this application to provide the solution, because applications, you know, across the board, nothing unique to this one, should deal with the consequences that they cause, and this seems to be overspilling into a consequence that's already there. So it adds a complexity to that debate that I wasn't aware of till that comment was made. Just a few bits and bobs, very specific items. So one resident has asked whether we can ensure that the northern buffer, the one that borders Valebrook Road and Swallows Close, could be protected and undisturbed in the same way as one of the conditions on hedgerows, in order to protect it from impact through development and knock-on effects into Rundlebeck itself, pollution, things like that. So something for you to consider. And another asked whether we can assure that the land in the northwest corner of the site slopes away from the properties in Farrier Way, in order that water flows away from those properties. And that's a reaction to a promise that's been made by the applicant to those residents, but it's not reinforced in the conditions, and was being asked to sort of do belt and braces on that. And finally, from me, you'll be pleased to know, with one caveat, is that the applicants have presented to me a draft plan for plot 8, which shows that they can create a little bit more separation distance. This is not world changing, I have to say, in terms of the impact on numbers 2 and 3 Walnut Close. And they have asked, and I will ask, that if it comes down to just that issue, whether some form of delegation of your choosing could be arranged to adjust plot 8 and only plot 8, which I think would be within the scope of the powers we could do. So that might be through the chair or the chair of the ward members, or whatever configuration you choose. So just before I finish, just to let you know, I've got a very detailed critique of all of the conditions from both the applicant side and the parish council, but I'll keep it'll go on a bit. So I'll keep those to myself, and if and when we get to the point of discussing conditions, I'll put those on the table then, and let you know what's being aspired from both sides. Louis, presentation now, so if you can, please. So just very quick, because we've all had this for a while and have been through it in immense detail. So when we talk about the northern buffer strip, you can see it. That plan's pointed north to south, all along north boundary. That's what I just to in terms of people wishing, or someone at least, need to be undisturbed. And that's also, thanks, Louise. That's also the strip that's adjacent to the beck. If you can quickly move on, we'll go through these as quickly as possible. If we move on a slide, Louise, please. Oh, sorry, it's weary. Right, I've chosen this plan to show the affordable housing. So when people talk about the groupings of affordable housing, you can see them there in 2 groups of 10 in the orange stuff and the blue and green stuff. And then there's 4 floating about sort of separately on their own. So just so you're familiar with what people mean when they talk about these concentrations or groupings, or, well, I said ghettos earlier, didn't I? Because that's how someone else has described them. And again, please, Louise. Yeah, in a similar vein, allied really, a number of the reputations talk about extensive areas of car parking. And these are the parts of the site they refer to. So the one on the left there was that very western end of the site. And as you can see there, it proposes a row of 12, I think, parking spaces, broken only by hedges, so a row of parking. And on the right, that was the part of the site that had the orange houses, orange depicting discount market houses, by the way, in case you're wondering the significance of the colours. And again, another courtyard arrangement of parking there that people have commented adversely upon. Thanks, Louise. Right, this is important because this is the configuration of the new access. There are a lot of comments about this. Exactly where Louise got the cursor now, it's like you're telepathic, thanks, was where we have stood, and it's from there that I reached the conclusion that you can see up and down Mill Hill. But you'll see in the report there are comments from people saying that's fine on a quiet Monday afternoon when I went, most recently anyway. But this area gets completely cluttered with cars, particularly associated with the school, and a different picture emerges then. And the other reason I chose this extract is just to show you the new public parking that would be created, which is that row running through the middle of that slide, which they're not allocated to any house, so they'll be there to assist with this parking issue and get a number, a proportion at least, of the cars off the street. Thanks, Louise. So this is plot 8 that I mentioned. So the grey houses just to the right of the red line are 2 and 3 Walnut Close that I referred to, and you can see the proximity and the house type concerned. It's 5.5 metres high, sits a little bit lower, which helps, and it's these plots that the applicants have said they're happy to work with us further if it becomes, for want of a better phrase, the sticking point, the only sticking point. And again, Louise, and this is the comments in relation to Mrs. Leithborough. So Mrs. Leithborough lives in the greyed out house, L-shaped house there, I understand. And again, we're at the very northwest corner of the site here. And when she speaks, she'll be talking, I presume, about relationship with the closest houses on the site. That row of 3 is actually 4 houses within a block of 3, and the turning circle and the pumping station that you can see depicted on that extract. So just to help you with your geography there, really. Just, oh, there's one more point on that. Sorry, Louise, I was jumping about there. You can just about make a line out where the words electrical substation appear in the greyed out bit. Yep, that's it, Louise, thank you. So to the left of that line is the private property garden, and to the right of it is parish council land. This is also the subject of the request for the bridge. Thanks. And some levels planned. So these are the things we've quoted, but a general picture about how the houses relate to one another across. Well, there's many cross sections there, but you can see, generally speaking, we've got 2-storey against 2-storey, nothing massively tall or taller than what's already built. So existing on the right of each of those, proposed on the left. And that's the next application.
Okay, right, thank you. Thank you for that. Right. Do we have any questions of Mr. Worley before we move on to the speakers on that? No. I just have one question before I invite the another 2 members. You mentioned that plot 8, if that was going to be the sticking point, it would just be to address anything relating to plot 8. But I note that plot 7 and 8, they're sort of semi-detached houses. So would it just be plot 8 or would it be 7 and 8?
I apologise, I don't have access to the message that was sent to me. It's 8 that causes the problem.
It does, yeah.
It's probably best couched in terms of 7 and 8, because I can't remember if they were talking about reducing it to single one or moving the or what. So let's
okay.
Tonight.
Just thought I'd ask for clarification, because I know that it is a semi-detached, so obviously you've got 7 and 8 which are together.
Mr. Longley's down to speak, so maybe you could ask him the same question.
Okay, thank you. We have Councillor Higgins. Do you want to ask a quick question?
Just clarification on the War Memorial Institute. Your calculation, which I have to say, Mr. Worley, I think is the right way of working it out, is 74,748, and the WMI are asking for 92,400. They're the 2 figures that we're looking at. Is that correct? And the applicant is comfortable with the way the WMI have worked out. Is that what you were saying earlier?
they would contest the word comfortable.
I
They,
chose my words very carefully.
yeah, the word I wrote when I was straight off the phone was accepted with great reluctance.
Okay, I will bear that in mind, because I still think that's relevant. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Faulkner.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a thing on the public parking area that was just inside the entrance to the site, Mr. Worley. Some of the objections were about the parking on the main road for the school time. Would those parking spaces be there available for parents parking to get their children to school?
Yeah, that's exactly the intention.
Yeah, that's okay then. So it should get rid of that problem or help it.
Help to.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Pritchett, do you have a question of Mr. Worley before we start with the speakers?
Yes, three points of clarification. I couldn't find in the Mr. Worley compliance with EN9 on page 117 of the local plan. Energy efficiency and carbon, it relates to solar power, water efficiency, books and that sort of thing. That's the one question. That's the first question. The second question is quite simple, and Chair will tell me whether this is the appropriate time or not. In respect of the Appendix C, Condition 3, is it appropriate to put in the amount, the smattering, and mention the blue tiles and exactly the local stone? That's the second one.
Perhaps we can do this later on in the debate. And
Okay? Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I didn't know about the protocol. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, that's brilliant. So thank you very much. It was just basically points of clarification on what the officer presented. If there's anything you missed, you could actually go back and say, actually, I missed that sentence. But these are something totally different, so they'll be included in the general debate. Thank you. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Worley. We have five speakers this evening. We have we have three speakers plus the two ward councillors are going to be sharing a slot, so that'll be 1.5 minutes each for them. The first speaker this evening is Mr. Ken Bray. If you could call Mr. Ken Bray forward, please, Natasha, which I can see he's already here. You beat me to it. Thank you. You're on mute, Mr. Bray.
Mute.
Hi. And I'm sure good evening. I'm sure you're well aware you have 3 minutes, Mr. Bray.
Okay, thank you. Can I just say that Mr. Worley was wrong about the traffic? The point is you're throwing a new junction into the middle of it. Anyway, right, thank you. Stathen has long accepted this allocated site, and we sincerely wish to make it a successful part of our community. However, we're asking for it to be deferred as it is not yet acceptable, not just to the village, but to the Melton local plan itself. Yes, as you will hear, we had an agreeable and positive community engagement meeting early in the year. And yes, the revised plan, when it eventually appeared, did address some of our concerns. Unfortunately, it doesn't address some of the original issues and it raises some new ones. You'll hear more about those later. We agreed to another community engagement meeting on the 10th of August, despite the very short notice and despite much of the detail, finished floor levels, ridge heights, house type plans, street views, materials, elevations not being available until the 6th of August. Expecting further discussions. Instead, we found a total refusal to contemplate any changes, and within hours an email received confirming this. That is not community engagement. We believe this proposal is not ready or yet or fit for purpose, and believe further amendments should be made, and we remain ready to discuss those improvements. The relevant policies here, C2, defining the housing mix, fail. Policy D1 says, amongst other things, layout should be sympathetic to the character of the area, fail. Buildings should reflect the local vernacular, fail. Amenity of neighbouring properties should not be compromised, fail. And makes adequate provision for car parking, fail. The policy specifically for this site asks for a scheme designed to preserve and enhance the character and appearance of the settlement and a sensitively designed layout not driven by the objective of maximising density. Fail. This is not a sensitive layout, and the density proposed with double the desired proportion of 4 and 5 bed houses described in the report as being within a margin of flexibility. Really, Jim? double. Some flexibility creates restricted parking options, often with 3 spaces in a line and elsewhere grouped together resembling a municipal car park. 7 4-bed houses rely on 3D parking, starting with plot 1 right at the entrance. Another 15 3-beds the same. This will inevitably lead to cars being parked on the road, and some of the garages on the south boundary unnecessarily impinge into the 5-metre buffer zone. Affordable rent homes are pushed to the end of the site, facing outwards and not integrated. This scheme has been recommended for approval despite failings on the policy aspects listed above, despite the objection from Melton's own housing officer that it's not in accordance with C2, despite concerns of building control over fire safety, despite failing to respect the 5-metre buffer asked for by the ecology officer, and despite creating overlooking and overbearing of neighbouring properties. Others will speak on those later. We believe that some changes to orientation and siting of dwellings and some house type changes, more bungalows, less 4-beds, a satisfactory scheme could be achieved, and ask for a deferral to allow for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Do we have any questions of Mr. Bray? I see you have your hand raised, Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bray. You mentioned about the car park and the type that it is. It's I've looked at it, and I have actually spoken with Mr. Worley on it as well. There usually tends to be 3 different types of car parking, and I think they all present their pros and cons. If you have tandem parking, and I think that will be debated, that causes a particular issue, especially if more cars on it. If you put them in what I'd call courtyard parking, which is parking at the back of houses, people then have to walk to their house and take in young children or push chairs and shopping and all that like. Or you get this type of car parking that has been proposed, and I accept it's not necessarily the most aesthetically pleasing. So do you have a solution of, if you're asking the committee to consider that, what solution would you put forward? Because they all have their pros and cons.
Yes, we have. Councillor Steadman will say some more on that later.
To be fair, I am asking you though. I mean,
yeah. Well, what we say is there, particularly the 3 4-bed houses on the main street where that applies. There are opportunities to get a parking space at the side of the house, 1 or 2 where there's an opportunity to get a space at the back of the house, and some of those in the middle. With a bit of rejigging of the gardens and the spacing of the houses, you could get them alongside rather than in tandem for the worst offending houses. So overall, it's bad. There's 22, but there are 3 in the middle which are really in a dangerous place, if you like, at the back of the in and out.
So do you accept though, if we put car parking at the back of houses, that also presents other problems for occupants as well though, and then it can lead them to do informal parking and parking on the street? That's what it wouldn't.
Yeah, it wouldn't be solely at the back, if you like. It might be 1 of the 3 spaces was at the back and 2 are at the front. So it wouldn't be your first car, if you like, that's at the back. And it's almost better for the resident to have.
I'm sorry, I'm not referring to tandem park. I'm referring to you said as in like the municipal car parking, which
the municipal car park. I think those can be addressed by just changing some of the orientation of the spaces, breaking them up more than they are at the moment. Because at the moment there's very little division, and there is room. We say that we don't mind the parking eating into the green space a little bit, because we much sooner have a proper car parking space than have people parking on the grass, if you see what I mean. Okay, so there is room to adjust the green space and the parking space to make them more amenable.
Okay.
And same with the one at the bottom, you could stagger it a bit. It doesn't have to be in a straight line.
That's been really helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, did you have a question of Mr. Bray?
Yeah, I did, Chair. Thank you. Councillor Bray, you mentioned housing mix, and in particular, you just said that it didn't comply. Obviously, it doesn't comply with the optimum, what we need on the numbers, etc. With the 4 beds being over, what would be acceptable in relation to housing mix in numbers to yourselves?
it doesn't need a lot. I think the housing officer asked for more bungalows, and we asked for more bungalows. So even if there were 2 more bungalows and 2 less 4-bed houses, it would be a much better mix.
Okay, that's
I
great.
think overall the average is high, but it you know, appreciate what they're trying to get. So, but that it doesn't need to move a vast way down the list.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Thank you very much, Mr. Bray.
Thank you.
Before we move on, I must apologise. There seems to be some background noise or feedback coming across the internet, so I do apologise to members and also people who are watching. Unfortunately, it can't be helped. Sometimes it is the connection that we're experiencing problems with. Thank you. A second, have you completed your questions, Councillor Brown, because your hand is still raised? Thank you. Right. Our second speaker this evening is Lisa Leesborough, who is an objector, and she's speaking on behalf of herself and Leslie Sorby. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair and Committee.
Hello. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I speak on behalf of myself, but also other residents of Stathern. When I say that we're not opposed to development per se, we accept that all communities need to grow and develop. But our concerns about this particular development is that it's not designed to be in keeping with our rural village. It impacts significantly on current residents, particularly those bordering it, and it creates a real risk of harm with the access into and out of the development. Stathern's already congested with traffic at peak times, and most notably at school drop-off and pick-up times, where numerous cars are parked along the road and up to the sharp bend at the bottom of Mill Hill, which is where the access is sited for this development. The volume of traffic entering and leaving via this road on the bend, where vision is obscured by parked cars and where vehicles approach from Mill Hill at speed, creates a real danger, especially to young children going to and from school. We seek confirmation that some form of traffic calming will be implemented prior to any work starting on the development, as heavy plant machinery and loaded aggregate lorries will only exacerbate that danger. In the documents, there's reference to an undeveloped corridor along the northern border of the site, meaning that the privacy of existing residents won't be affected. Residents in these areas do not share that view and feel that they will be overshadowed as the development is currently planned. In addition, 2 Walnut Close on the eastern border is significantly overshadowed by how close plot 8 is to the property, regardless of it being moved from being a semi-detached to a bungalow. We ask that consideration be given to reducing the number of houses and that plots be moved further back from the boundaries with existing properties and potentially use the space currently allocated for the greens, which seem to be unnecessary. The 2 groupings of 10 affordable houses are not in keeping with good estate planning or inclusion for those residents, and impacts on the neighbouring properties, as do the grouped car park areas, which are more in keeping with an urban development than a small rural community such as ours. I live at 42 Velbrook Road, wrongly marked as 38 on the plans, with my husband and 2 young children on the northwestern boundary opposite one of those groups of affordable housing and car parks, the nearest house to ours being an upside-down style house with living area upstairs. On our boundary, there appears to be no undeveloped corridor, as the road and turning circle is immediately adjacent to the hedge which borders our properties. I don't object to the affordable housing being built opposite us, but I do object to the volume of houses proposed for such a small area and part of the development. I have a 7-year-old disabled child who suffers significantly with sleep disruption. The noise that will be generated by the sheer number of people and cars using that road and the area immediately opposite us will have a significant impact on our management of our child's health and well-being, as her sleep will be further disrupted and will have greater difficulty in resettling her. We have concerns over privacy and safeguarding, as well as the current border is at the lowest point and is only a 5-foot hedge. Our entire back garden will be overlooked, as will the majority of rooms in our home, as they're all facing the land to be developed, with the road and the bridge potentially on the other.
30 seconds, Chair.
Okay.
A smaller number of houses opposite us and the road being further away would make a significant difference, as would screening along the border. Would welcome a dialogue to address the issues raised to reach a mutually satisfactory resolution. I've written in detail to members of the Planning Committee, and you have my further representations in relation to other detailed aspects. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for that. Do we have any questions? I think we have one from Councillor Holmes.
Right, you can hear me now, yeah.
Can do.
Yes, I was, I take on board our last speaker, and you say you've had some dialogue. I wonder what dialogue, have you had enough dialogue? You know, it
No.
seems, you know, that you need, when it's problems like this, there should be a lot more dialogue, but I don't know how much you've been able to have with anybody or with whom.
To answer that question, I haven't had dialogue in the form of face-to-face communication, albeit either by telephone or a video meeting. I've had 2 emails from Mr. Longley and responses from Mr. Worley saying that they would look into the issues. I've had a street plan, an artist's impression of the far end of the development sent to me by Mr. Longley, and confirmation that the hedges bordering what looks like the municipal car park opposite our land will be native hedgerow, but specific questions in relation to what screening, what mitigation there may be, or any alternatives in terms of moving the housing mix around opposite us haven't been answered. I've had some confirmation that I can have a conversation with a technical person in relation to the pumping station, for example, to address concerns that I've raised, which as yet haven't been answered, about what measures there might be in place should the pumping station fail, what noise might be raised by the pumping station, because at the moment I don't know what that looks like. I appreciate that the landscaping plan and the planting plan will be something that will be looked at post planning, but obviously that is something that I'm very concerned about, because it has a huge impact on our privacy and the issues that I've raised in relation to safeguarding noise and privacy. The hedge at the moment is it's not a secure boundary, so we would have to look at putting something in place to try and ensure that that boundary is made secure, on the basis that it's a road opposite us to which people will be walking, particularly if there's a bridge on the other border of our property. So 2 emails from Mr. Longley, but not the opportunity of having a detailed conversation about any mitigating and ameliorating plans that might be put in place to assist.
Right, thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
If we move on to our 3rd speaker this evening, who is Guy Longley, the agent for the applicant. Good evening, Mr. Longley.
Good evening.
Good evening. Right, you have 3 minutes, Mr. Longley.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. The officer report clearly sets out the planning permission in relation to the proposals and deals comprehensively with the various representations that have been made. I would offer the following comments from the developer's perspective. The site is allocated in the adopted local plan, and therefore the principle of residential development is firmly established. The proposal involves 74 dwellings, with the indicative figure of the site in the plan. At 22 dwellings per hectare, the scheme provides for a low density development that is sympathetic to the setting. The latest master plan is a result of a continuing dialogue with the parish, ward members and officers, and includes a number of significant changes to the original proposals in response to these discussions, including retention of more on-site planting through the provision of a central green space, provision of a trim trail, and inclusion of a cluster of stone-built properties reflecting local vernacular. We consider the layout is acceptable and should be approved. However, we have been continuing to discuss possible minor amendments with the ward members and the parish council. Therefore, we're a bit disappointed with Councillor Bray's speech on tonight. These minor alterations could potentially be delegated for approval by the chair and the Assistant Director for Strategic Planning and Regulatory Services in discussions with ward members. Concerns have been raised over the provision of tandem parking. Tandem parking is provided on a small percentage of properties and is well below provision on other schemes provided in villages and found acceptable by this committee. The Highway Authority has raised no concerns about the proposals, and the layout will provide a safe, pedestrian-friendly environment. Members and the Parish Council should be assured that as a company, Davidson's has a commitment to ensuring high-quality new developments on sites, and its involvement in this site will deliver a high-quality scheme. They have a particular expertise in developing residential schemes in smaller villages and are rated as a 5-star builder in the HBF and NHBC Customer Satisfaction Survey. The conditions proposed will allow the council and the parish to have further input into the various details of the proposals, including use of materials, landscaping, as these conditions are discharged. The proposal will provide a package of Section 106 contributions to improve local facilities, including education, health, the War Memorial Institute, and Stavern Recreation Ground. Davidsons are also willing to contribute towards a traffic calming gateway feature on Mill Hill approaching the village. Davidsons are committed to bringing forward the development at the earliest opportunity and to continue the positive dialogue with the council
30 seconds, Chair.
in relation to the details required to be provided by the proposed conditions and through the construction phase. We therefore urge members to approve the application subject to conditions and a Section 106 agreement in accordance with the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'd like to invite members to ask some questions, but first one, could I ask you, Guy, I know you've been in communication with Mr. Worley to do with plot 8, but plots 7 and 8 are joint because they're a pair of semi-detached bungalows. So anything that we can do to alleviate the problems for plot 8, would that be relevant to plot 7 as well?
Yes, I think the option that Mr. Wheeler referred to would involve both, and would be a option to provide a single bungalow in that location to allow a slight adjustment to move it away from the boundary.
Which could be moved away from the boundary of the property with to Walnut Close.
Yes, it provides a bit more space there by that.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you. The first one, Councillor Holmes, you have your hand raised, or is that still from the last time?
Yes, I have got my hand raised.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification from the last speaker. But you will have heard, and you said that you're a bit disappointed. I think I would be disappointed as well, because you seem to be wanting to put a development like this in a rural area as an urban one, and this is what people have been saying. But is this a thing that you always do with your business? You know, with your firm, is that how it works, or do you have different developments for different areas? You know, I'm just sort of asking that general question.
Yes, I mean, I think Davidsons have a very strong reputation for designing schemes that are suitable to the location that they're in. And I think, you know, we've worked very hard and very closely with the parish and ward members to work up a scheme that would be acceptable. And I think we're getting very close. I think the discussions that we've had over the last day, in fact, you know, has narrowed down some of the issues, hopefully. And
right.
You know, there is scope to look at some amendments, but you know, I would say it is not an urban scheme. It is a density that is low density, and it's appropriate in our view to the location.
I was meaning more types of houses, really. No,
yes, again, well, I think as I said in the presentation, you know, in response to comments from the parish, we provided that cluster of stone built buildings to reflect the particular local vernacular, and that was a change that was brought in, you know, directly in response to the discussions with the parish.
Yes, they've obviously rubbed off from Waltham, because I insist on stone all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. And before I move on to members, I have Mr. Worley's hand raised. Did you want to come in at that point, Mr. Worley?
Hi, please. I just wondered if it might be in order to ask Mr. Longley to react to the point raised by Councillor Pritchett after I spoke about EN9 credentials, which Mr. Longley means the sort of green and energy efficient credentials of the development. Sorry, it's not at my fingertips, so I will be struggling.
Okay.
I mean,
perhaps Councillor Pritchett could ask that question himself.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Mr. Worley. I've got two you might be able to help me with. One is the policy generally with the policy EN9 on page 117 of the local plan, and one is a much more simpler question. I mean, it's the extent of, will there be wiring? Will there be wiring in the loft ready for somebody to put solar panels on? Will the power in the garage be sufficient? You know, has there been a checklist agreed with the planning department? Is there going to be water butts for the various sizes of the houses, raised bed? The general nature.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of detail could be subject to a condition. I mean, there is scope we be able to put electric connections in the garages to provide for charging for vehicles. Those sort of provisions can be made. The homes are modern, energy efficient homes, so they will provide for those facilities. But there will be further details provided, and that could be a subject to condition to require that as well.
Thank you very much. The other question is much simpler, but I'm not technically competent to look at this. One of the things that helps homeowners, particularly in 2-bedroom houses and affordable houses, is ability to do a loft conversion. Now, what is the angle of the roofs here of the two, particularly on the affordables? Is there an option for the family to extend with a subject to planning permission with a Velux window into the loft?
Now, unfortunately, that probably is beyond my technical expertise as well, being a mere planner. I wouldn't be able to comment on that, but I would expect that there would be scope for adaptability.
Okay. Is that completed your questions, Mr.
For the stage, yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We now have Councillor Faulkner. So sorry to have kept you, Councillor Faulkner.
That's quite all right. Everybody's important. Okay, thank you, Chair. Just a question, please, Mr. Longley, regarding what you said about the tandem parking being a small number of properties that are affected by the tandem parking. Just for clarity for people who are listening into this, who may not have seen any of the plans or anything, how many properties are there out of the 74 that are subject to tandem parking?
Our assessment is that along the main street, which I think perhaps is where the most concern is, we take view that there's, in our definition of tandem parking, that there's 7 and 21 of the 74 in total. As I say, we've looked at other schemes that have quite significantly more tandem parking than that arrangement. So I think we feel in terms of the numbers on the site, they're not it's not excessive, and tandem parking is one solution to parking that can work well. And we have, again, as part of the changes, included a number of visitor spaces to give that option as well. So there's some pull-in spaces you see on the Western Green and so forth that provide greater flexibility in terms of parking as well.
Thank you. That's cleared that away perfectly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Higgins, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Longley. You were mentioning about the dialogue with the ward councillors and obviously the community. And I think you all have also accepted there are some parts of it that are still probably either left for interpretation or a bit further debate. So, for example, the property we talked about with Walnut Close, and a few things I think is coming up regarding car parking and how that's solved. Would it be with you? Because if we start changing the mix or the layout design, that's pretty much going for a refusal. So that would mean the committee didn't agree with what's in front of us, and so we'd go for a refusal if we were minded to do that. But in terms of these niggles, so to speak, which people have been raising, and your willingness to keep talking to the ward councillors and obviously the chair and Mr. Worley on this, would you be find it acceptable if there was a permit in and then subject to these conditions for you to carry on that extra debate between yourself, the ward councillors, and Mr. Worley and the chair? Or are you asking for us to sort of permit with no questions asked? That's where I'm coming from.
I mean, obviously, our starting point is we feel the scheme is acceptable. I mean, we've had an ongoing dialogue with Councillor Stedman, and I think she's helpfully sort of brokered discussions between ourselves and the parish, and I think that has narrowed down the potential issues, and I think there is scope for some minor adjustments. We've talked about the 2 Walnut Close issue, the scope to do something there, and I think in relation to the speaker, in relation to Lisa, I think again flipping the unit is something to be looked at and is a minor adjustment. I think the other issue from the parish was dealing with issues of tandem parking. There are some things we can do. There are some technical difficulties that would mean some aspects of the requests from the parish may be more difficult. But no, I mean, I think that there is scope to make some minor adjustments that hopefully would address some of those concerns that have been set out. I do think there has been over today been a narrowing down of those points really.
And I think just to clarify, I mean, the other point, it wasn't necessarily in your all the additional work, and in I think the connectivity I did pick up on in the other speakers. Would you be supportive of that connectivity into the village? Because I think that's another one. You know, your future when you're coming to sell these, having that connection of footpaths or footbridges into the village. I think. What's your view on that?
I think the position is that we would question whether that's necessary in relation to this development, but would be willing to make a contribution to a scheme if the parish council wanted to take a scheme forward.
Okay, that's been really helpful. Thank you, and thank you, Chair, for inviting me.
Thank you. Mr. Worley, did you want to come back again? I've just seen your light still. No? Okay, thank you. Councillor Chandler. Councillor Chandler.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, but we can't see you at the moment. You can still ask your question though, if you
I
want.
can see myself.
Okay. Well, if you ask your question, then we can sort your technology out in a minute.
I'm not really asking a question, I'm making a point.
Okay.
As some of you will recall, I was the lead member on the local plan. And when this site was put forward, when we advertised for sites, several officers went and looked at it. And I had, as I knew the site, I had detailed discussions with those officers about the availability and how good it was for development. And I was told by 2 officers, sadly neither of them are now with the council, but 65 was the max that should be permitted. We've now got 74 houses proposed, and I believe this is the problem. It's the 9 extra ones that are causing most of our problems. I accept that the ratio of houses per hectare is low compared with the 31 per hectare which the government advised, but nevertheless Stathern is a very rural village, and I don't think that I think people are quite within their rights saying it's overdevelopment. And I don't know what Mr. Longley would like to say about the extra 9, because to me the 9 are the killing stop with most of the parish council and the objectors. Perhaps you'd like to answer the question. Thank you.
Did you wish to respond, Mr. Longley?
I didn't catch the last bit of that, unfortunately. I mean, I think all I could point to again, I think Mr. Worley in his report sets it out that the figure in the local plan is indicative, and the inspector at the local planning examination made that clear that the figure that would be provided on his site would be effectively addressed through a detailed application. I think very often it's only through a detailed application, when a detailed layout is put forward, that you can really establish the numbers on a site. And I think partly the plan was probably a greater concern about extent of flooding along the brook course. As part of the work that we've done on the application, we've done detailed modelling of the brook course along the northern boundary, which means that is not as much of a constraint as it perhaps was perceived to be at the local plan stage. And again, I think I just again refer to the density at 22 hectare is low density.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brown, sorry to have kept you waiting.
No, you're okay. Thank you. Mr. Longley, in relation to a notice in the report, and it's made reference to, I think, a couple of times this evening, in relation to the road safety, that you're going to provide a gateway feature into the village with road safety features. Could you explain what that will actually look like for the committee, and also explain in more detail why you feel it's unacceptable that before the first house is occupied that you wouldn't be able to have the road safety features in place?
I mean, I think as Mr. Worley set out, there are various options for traffic calming schemes, and we've indicated a willingness to make a contribution. The Highway Authority had indicated that, in their view, a highway safety scheme is not actually necessary, but we would be willing to contribute to a scheme. But the details of that scheme would be a matter for discussion and agreement. So, you know, as Mr. Worley set out, there are a range of options, and it's not limited to those options. I think from our experience on other sites, you know, a gateway feature in terms of traffic calming can be a sensitive and appropriate solution. And again, I think, yeah, it's always the practicalities of delivering these facilities. I think, you know, the conditions set out with a trigger point, and perhaps that could be a matter for further discussion.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bindloss.
Thank you, Chair. Really, mine was a statement as well, just to endorse what Councillor Higgins was saying to Mr. Longley. I think it's absolutely imperative. There are still quite a few questions that remain unanswered, and I think it really is imperative that they continue to work and have a dialogue with our ward councillors and the residents as well, because as it stands now, I think there are just too many things there that just need some fine tuning, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if there's no further questions, I think we'll let Mr. Longley move back to the attendees. So thank you very much, Mr. Longley. Thank you. Next speakers this evening are the ward councillors, Councillor Steadman and Councillor Evans.
Could I just have a point of clarity, please, Chair? Councillor Evans and I were given to understand that we would have 3 minutes each to speak, so we have written entirely different speeches to those 3 minutes.
All right. Normally, it's just when I've been addressing the committee, we've only shared the slot. It hasn't been 3 minutes each. Perhaps either Kieran or Natasha could clarify that, but my understanding is it's 3 minutes. I might be wrong.
Correct, Councillor Grant.
That's right.
Sorry,
Natasha.
Yeah.
Could I come in here? Obviously, this isn't what me or Councillor Steadman accepts. Councillor Steadman has put so much effort into her speech. There's absolutely no way that I'm going to take away from her fact that she's got everything and spent days and weeks on this. So it's important, I think, that you hear exactly what she's got to say for the full 3 minutes. So I will withdraw, and I'm sure that she will cover the topics that I need to. We'll just have to leave it that way, and that's fine with me.
I would have thought, and the two of you would have worked together on this, and my assumption is that yes, you probably have, because you've always had conversations on things. So, okay, so thank you very much for that. It's very generous of you, Councillor Evans. Right, Councillor Steadman, you know the routine. You have 3 minutes.
If I can repeat 2, will you give Chris 1 minute?
Before we start, Councillor Higgins has his hand raised. Is there something you want to add?
I was going to say, if Councillor Evans has written his consideration, can that be shared, or is that out of protocol? I don't know.
Has it already been circulated?
If it's that's what some of the public won't know that, though, so that's what I'm trying to get to. So we would have read it. That's where I'm coming from.
Right. It hasn't been circulated, has it? No.
No, that's
Okay,
correct.
so-
Councillor Grant, it
So
hasn't.
we're unaware of the content totally, but as Councillor Steadman and Councillor Evans have sort of indicated, they're of joint minds on this one. So if we can continue with Councillor Steadman, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, councillors, we do not feel that this application is yet reflective of Chapter 124 of the NPPF, creation of high quality buildings and places, which is fundamental to what the planning process should achieve. Good design being a key aspect of sustainable development, creates better places to live and helps expectations to make development acceptable to communities. Clear about design expectations and how these will be tested. Effective engagement between applicants, communities and local planning authorities, etc. There are concerns with this proposal, not insurmountable, but concerns. I'm sure Councillor Evans will agree, out of all of our ward villages, Stavern is the most nucleated of them all, with a very strong sense of community and a vibrant mix of age ranges, mingled in to create an environment that is welcoming and inclusive. Segregated clumps of affordable housing at either end of this site does not reflect this ethos. As you have heard, there are particular concerns from 2 residents, and we could easily make small design changes that would really enhance their quality of life with this development. Instead, we are causing unnecessary stress, but we have not had an opportunity to tackle this or to meet with these residents to give assurances. This was immediately put to committee after our last meeting. 3 tandem parking spaces is not workable. We know that. This is a rural location and dependency on the car is documented to be higher. On a site of this size, that equates to over 30 more cars than in an urban setting. This site meets the standards required for parking on the basis of 2 tandem and a garage to reach 3 spaces. As I'm sure you're all aware from previous developments we have looked at, this doesn't work. This site is sat on the edge of a very historic village, and although Davidson's built very nice houses, the whole estate could become crammed with cars, ruining the street scene and giving an urban feel to a very rural fieldside location. Parish Council and I have manoeuvred around these problems with the proposed provision of pull-in areas and dropped curbs to some properties, preparing to lose some of the green spaces but increasing the amenity for the residents of this site, who will become part of our community, and it is for them in part that we are representing here tonight. I have worked very hard with the Parish Council in the past week to address the main issues, finding solutions to put forward to the applicant to make the site more in keeping with its location and to tackle some of the concerns raised. We have found compromises that we feel may be acceptable to Davidson's. We have a definitive list of adjustments or minor ones that could be easily adapted into the site. If you are minded to defer this application tonight to afford us the time to put the finishing touches to this site, increase the amenity for our future residents and smooth the concerns for the existing villages, then I think we could be ready for the next committee in 2 weeks, just 2 weeks. We've done all the legwork.
That's time, Chair.
I believe it is possible to make these adjustments and tailor this site to its rural location, creating a benchmark for future sites. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just over the 3 minutes. Thank you.
I cut some out of that as well.
I know.
Chris's bit.
Councillor Higgins, you have your hand raised. Did you want to ask a question of Councillor Steadman?
Thank you. Thanks for allowing Councillor Steadman just those that discretion that's afforded to you, Chair. Councillor Steadman and Councillor Evans, this can be to either or of you. I think, like as you were saying, is you can tell a testament to a ward councillor of when they work with their community and work with the developer and to get it to here. And I acknowledge that in terms of how much the applicant and the developer is looking to put into the community, going sometimes beyond what is required. So are you asking, in what you saying is either if the committee were minded to permit the niggles, as I spoke about before, you would want to discuss those a little bit further, or if it's a deferment, obviously you're looking to get that sorted within 2 weeks, and you believe that it's ready, package ready, so the developer can get on with it. Because as I said to the applicant before, I think if we start fiddling about with the layout or taking houses out, that then is really a refusal. But if it's these niggles, as I call it, then I think it's going to be over to you rather than this committee to decide all that.
I think it's for the committee to decide whether to refuse it or not. I have worked very hard with the parish council and my fellow ward councillor, and we came up with a definitive list as somewhere to draw the line of what we would find kind of acceptable. There will always be queries on density, and we're exhausted saying that. So we came up with a list of compromises that we thought, instead of getting rid of, say, for example, 3 tandem car parking spaces, that we could put pull-ins. And I think it's a testament to the parish councillors that they are prepared to lose some of their buffer to space out the car parking around the affordables to give it a more rural feel, things like that. It's come a very long way, and it's been a very hard work this week. And I've actually sent Mr. Longley a list of those this morning. I should assume it will take some time for him to work through them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, could I just add to what Councillor Steadman said? We just have to be aware as a committee, the planning committee, it's always tough, but Stavern in the next 5 years, backwards and forwards from it, will be increasing inside by almost a third. Now think about that carefully. A third size over a 5-year period. We've got 2, and also we've got 2 appeals, both at Toffs Hill and Blacksmith End, in the pipeline. There is considerable development, as even Jim Worley has admitted, over the last few years. Already about 20 houses have already been built. This is a significant moment for us to make certain we get this right. And I agree entirely with Councillor Steadman. Personally, I would prefer a deferral so that next 2 weeks we intensively work, and the developers have been, we'll be honest here, very good in some flexibility. We've had other developers who, as you know, don't do anything, but these have given way. And in particular, my concern is plot 7 and 8 and turning that into a single bungalow. And I think that needs to come back to committee with a bungalow on that spot, because otherwise it will be an incredible impact on the residents of Walnut Close.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you both. That answers my question, Chair.
Thank you. Before we move on, could I ask Mr. Worley a question? There's mention of sort of a 2-week turnaround on this, but if there's going to be alterations to the layout, surely it'd have to go out for consultation again. Am I correct or not?
Yeah.
That's why I wasn't asking the layout changes, Chair.
Mm.
But I think even some of these tweaks go beyond sort of the scope of condition. We're talking about adjusting that. But yeah, so as you speculate, that puts in train a necessary set of procedures which don't fit within 2 weeks, and might. There's no one there to do it either. It's 2 weeks.
So it's not going to be 2 weeks. It's going to be October, isn't it, before we get anywhere with this? But that doesn't mean to say it can't be achieved. Okay. Councillor Holmes, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I do, Madam Chairman. At the last planning meeting, we had a certain member who was imploring us to do things. It has never happened before. We cannot possibly be telling other councillors what to do. We're a planning committee, for goodness sake, and we have problems with these things. And I always thought, like Councillor Evans just said, if this could be changed and that could be changed, surely we have. You can't be saying we're going to do this and we're going to do that. Surely it's got to actually go to the committee now to see how they feel. But we can't be told that we should defer it or this or that or the other. It's every individual councillor on this committee to make the decision of what they think should happen. Thank you. I'm very sorry to say this, but it's very annoying when one councillor tries to tell us what to do, and it shouldn't be. Thank you.
Just a point of order, Chair. Just a point of order, if I may. come back on that is
Yes,
I'm not telling any councillor what to do. I'm merely asking the ward councillors what would work for them, and that was the question I asked them. I've asked that of the and to be fair, I've asked that of the parish council, and to go back into the smear, which I don't think is really appropriate. I'm glad that the committee made sure we saved the heritage of Melton. We didn't vote against it, unlike Councillor Holmes. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hope that's over with then. So, right, do you have any further questions for Councillor Steadman and Councillor Evans? Councillor Posnett, I see your hand is raised.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would just like to say to Councillor Steadman, she's having these discussions with the developer. Perhaps they'd look a bit closer at the property where the family on Valebrook Road look, because there are I understand the affordable houses that are being built there are masonettes, and dependent on what screening there is, the impact on their privacy, because that is the side of the house that looks out there where they've got a garden, where their disabled child sleeps, and because at the moment there is only a hedge which is not terribly secure, obviously they're concerned, very concerned about safeguarding issues for the children. And you know, I've heard a lot about Walnut Close, and I don't disagree with that at all. But I haven't heard very much about Valebrook Road, and I think that is a very important issue that we do need to look at.
Can I respond to that one,
Yep.
Chair?
Yes.
If I may, Councillor Posnett. Yeah, I would have to say, and Jim might not actually be aware of this, but we did do a definitive list with the Parish Council this week, and dialogue has been going backwards and forwards with Guy Longley. And we have we've come up with some good compromises for this. On this particular site for Mrs. Leithborough, what we have suggested is that either the masonette on the end is swapped with the affordables down at the bottom, which would give the masonette a panoramic view from its upstairs window. If that's not possible, then to change the design so that the lounge is downstairs, so that someone's not sat at an elevated position in their lounge all day overlooking nearby properties. We've also put forward to Mr. Longley the possibility of, in the short term, putting up trellis in the buffer zone to afford this family some privacy while we wait for some probably quite mature and dense planting along that side to be put in. So we have actually looked at all of this, and we have actually put forward solutions to a majority of the problems we're encountering.
Yeah, I was sure you would have, Councillor Steadman, but I just wanted to doubly make sure. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Right. Councillor Chandler, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think if discussions are still going on between the ward councillors and the applicant, as recently as today, if I understood Councillor Steadman correctly, we're not in a position to discuss this application tonight. It needs deferring until these things can come back as hard evidence. We might be doing this and we might get a compromise on that. I can't make a decision tonight on what might be. It's got to be in front of me, and I would propose here and now that this is deferred.
I think we're still questioning the speaker at the moment, Councillor Chandler. So if you wanted to say that for a little bit later.
Point.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry. I thought I saw Councillor Pritchett raise his hand, but he hasn't. Okay. So thank you very much, Councillor Steadman and Councillor Evans.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Right. Mr. Worley, do you want to respond to anything you've heard this evening? It's been very involved.
No, I don't think so. I could pick a few arguments with various people's rehearsal of history, but it won't get us anywhere. So
yeah,
everyone's entitled to view, and it's good to hear them.
Okay, thank you. Right, do we have any questions of the officers before we start the debate, councillors? Councillor Brown, you have your hand raised.
All right.
Yeah, question of Jim. Jim, just in relation to the housing mix, yep, and the fact that we've two questions actually on housing mix in two different types. One is on the 4 beds, we've got 27% against an optimum of 15%. Can you just explain to me how you've come to that and how that can, I know you've mentioned in the report, but just explain how that can be justified when the optimum is 15%, please.
Well, it's the whole frustrating background to policy C2 basically, which fared badly through the local plan examination. It's fair to say, much to my annoyance and other people's too, and it is so diluted now that it speaks of twisting and turning in many different ways, and says that those optimum figures are just one of the factors that you should take into account. When we wrote it, went to examination, it said words different of thou shall achieve these mixes, full stop. But it came out the other end of saying we should work towards trying to achieve these mixes, taking everything else into account. So a very much weaker version of the intention. And the background to that was the inspector's appetite for ensuring delivery, basically. So when we've got something that's right in some respects, wrong in others, and coupled with the affordable housing, which I put into the same section of the report, which is spot on, to be fair, we didn't think that shortcoming was sufficient to be refusing, with that policy background supporting it. Not saying I like it, just saying I don't think it quite stands to that level of what's the word I'm trying to say? It's not prescriptive, and its lack of prescription is a hindrance to us arguing it.
Okay, well, thank you for that one. And if I could just follow on, Chair, the second point I had on that was that following on to the affordable housing and looking at Staddon, and we're now saying Staddon's a sustainable village going to grow by a third. Can we just explain a little bit more detail the rationale why we've got very low social rented housing compared to the market discount? And the reason I asked that is that at one time, my knowledge of being a housing officer at Melton is that Staddon would have had a lot of council housing that's now been sold under the right to buy and very little housing association. How we've come to the fact that a sustainable village where we've got growing homelessness, etc., especially in the Vale, lack of housing, how we've come to more market discount and a very small number of social rentals.
So starting with the very local needs, i.e. Staddon's very own needs, they're very small indeed. So at a stroke, this application would meet them and probably 10 times over at the risk of being flippant. Beyond that, the affordable housing here is intended to make provision of the overall supply, and the mix we're talking about here fits more closely with that wider supply than the very local needs.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chandler, do you have a question for Mr. Worley?
No, I've lowered my hand, I thought.
No, your hand is still raised. Okay.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Okay, no problem. We now have Councillor Holmes. You have your hand raised. Is this a question of?
I do. It was the councillor. It was actually to ask Mr. Worley. It was when we Councillor Evans said, and if you can change this or change that, is that not right in count what we do and what we're told to do as councillors, Mr. Worley? That if we don't like this or we don't like that, we actually refuse the application. I thought that was how we're supposed to do. And then we start again. I thought
yeah, absolutely.
This is what I'm saying, you know, how it seems foreign to me that we're talking about doing a bit here and a bit there, and I thought that's what we were supposed to do.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised to hear of ongoing dialogue, even extending to today. And Councillor Steadman did say that I'm probably not cited on right. She's right. To be honest, the whole reason they're here tonight is because the applicants told us no more changes other than what's imposed by conditions. So we
Right.
thought just ended. And you're right. So it's, sorry, colloquialism, take it or leave it time.
Yeah, I thought that's what we've always been told, you know, for planning. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Higgins, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, it's the other side of the coin of what Councillor Holmes said, because I agree with what she does say. If you don't like all this stuff, it's a refusal. But my question to Mr. Worley is, obviously there are both applicant and ward councillors were saying some relative minor tweaks. Would it work? Does it work for you and officers if it's a permit, and for those between you, the chair, and the ward councillors, as we have done before, or just a general deferment? But then I think from what either officers and applicant is looking for is deferring on what, and I think that's probably going to help the debate, Chair. Over to you, Chair.
Yeah, and I think
Mr. Worley.
You put down things.
You're breaking up.
Sorry, the way that you. Is this better?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
The way you phrase that, Councillor Higgins, has a chicken and egg element to it, because until we know what changes the committee is going to be persuaded to, we don't know how they can be contained. You know, we talk about wholesale review here, or we talk about one or two things that is probably manageable. You know, the section 106 got to run its course anyway. So if we are, you know, for example, I spoke about plot 8 earlier. If that was the only thing, yeah, I'm sure we could take that away and deal with it with some delegated arrangement, which is what I've suggested. But if there's a shopping list as long as your arm or a wholesale redesign, then no.
Okay. Councillor Faulkner.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The way it's been, I'm listening at this, is we've got one party saying let's permit it and then look at the little tweaks. Other parties saying let's defer it because we want to do a little bit more than little tweaks, but in actual fact it's more of a redesign of several parts. So surely you can't satisfy both of them. So really, if it's all the minor tweaks that have been proposed so far, that are actually quite major in some cases, there would only be one decision, and that'd be to refuse it at this stage and come back with a different scheme that encompasses what everybody's been asking for.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to respond to that, Mr. Worley, or that was just mainly a statement, wasn't it? Okay.
That's how I read it.
Yeah, okay. So let's start the debate then. So we have Councillor Holmes. I see your hand is raised. You're on mute, Councillor Holmes.
Right. Yes, Madam Chairman, in then that view, I feel at this time that we do have to refuse this application and actually get it right. We can't do bits and pieces, and this is really where I was coming from. I totally understand the ward councillor and all the work they're doing and done, but if there are so many things that aren't right, let's start again and get it right. Now, I do feel for people that there's going to be noise, there's going to be all sorts of things, but I would like to propose that we refuse this application and it comes back totally right. And I would have hoped that it wouldn't have been as many houses, that it would be the 65 that we said we would have. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Falk, before we go any further, Mr. Worley, you've got your hand raised.
I have. Sorry, Councillor Holmes will know this. We need reasons.
We need reasons. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I can give you. Yeah, I can give you plenty of reasons. I'm not happy about the flood area because there's a main sewer and there's all about main sewers down here. That is actually something which I wanted to bring up, but nobody has brought it up yet. I wanted to bring that up. I'm not happy about that. I noticed that it says they're not happy that at Severn Trent, which is something nobody else has said. But I do know that this big pipe that goes down on the left-hand side They say that it's adequate. There's a lot of flooding in Southern. The reconfiguration of the houses, which I feel would be a lot better, and it would be so much better for the people who are living on this estate or are already living on this estate. I'm not 100% happy with the way that the parking is. I do go down to Southern quite a lot because it's not very far away from me. And my goodness, those cars don't half whip round the corner, especially when I'm going down Blacksmith End. It's a wonder there hasn't been an accident down there. I know it's further on, but it's amazing. If you've got a lot of cars, you know, there are so many things that I could keep on saying and saying, but let's talk about that at the end. I've no doubt if there is a seconder, they might want to come in as well with other problems.
I would just like to say that we need specifics for a refusal and specific points.
Yeah, well, the specific points are then that we haven't got the configuration of houses right, that we've got we haven't got them right, and I think that is so important. And that is one big thing. I don't feel that I said about the sewers. I've said about all the infrastructure. I feel that is very important that we get all that right. Being with infrastructures as well is the way that the house mix and the way that the overlooking, like the maisonettes and all these sort of things. We can't keep tweaking things. That we want to get it right. And we are going to get it right in the end, but this is the reasons why I am saying at this moment, refuse it, come back, get everything right, and then I'm sure we would be happy.
Thank you. Mr. Worley, did you want to come in? You still have your hand raised.
No, sorry, it's leftovers.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillor wish to second the motion to refuse? No, I can't see any hand raised.
I'm trying to come in.
Oh, right, okay. I can see your hand raised. Yes, Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll go along with Councillor Holmes and I will second the refusal. I think there's such a lot wrong with this and queries. I mean, on page 25, building control have come in and indicated possible issues with shared drives, which may not be in accordance with fire and waste collection requirements. These things should have been ironed out before this came to committee. There's far too much that's left in the air. I mean, I accept that Councillor Steadman and her fellow councillor have worked desperately hard on this to try and get a solution for tonight, but they hadn't been able to achieve this, sadly, and I think it's got to either be refused or deferred until we get a proper application in front of us that we can say yes or no to.
Okay,
there are far too many questions here. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Councillor Higgins, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I can't go along with the refusal, and I'll set out the reasons why. First of all, Severn Trent raises no objection at all, and
they do.
No, they don't. Not in the paper, they don't. And also, Severn Trent is a tier 1 infrastructure provider. They are tasked by the regulator to make sure that water and sewage is taken away. It isn't. It is nothing to do. It is nothing really to do with an applicant or a house builder. If you want to build a house in the middle of a field, it's up to you to make sure that either you use the tier 1 Severn Trent, for example, around here, and then you have to pay them to put you on the mains and take your waste away, but or you use some other method. It is not a reason for a refusal on there, and it's very dangerous, I think, to go along that one. I don't see any objection when flooding was mentioned from the Environmental Agency, so I think that's a bit dangerous there. Housing configuration, I understand that one, and that's obviously a matter of taste, and obviously, but parking, I don't think has been. I think officers have warned us before. It's not very. It's not a strong reason. What I worry about, And I think it's got to be very mindful in terms of all decision makers here. We're not planners, we're decision makers. And if we refuse this, the extras that I think that the ward councillors, the villagers, and also the officers have got on this application from a very, very, respectable applicant, being Davidson's, a Leicestershire-based company as well, employ lots of people. And NBC has a great, working relationship with Davidson's. They're looking to put some significant investment here, and the council obviously talks to Davidson's about infrastructure and works well with them. So we've got to bear that in mind. This isn't another one of those, I won't mention the developers, but some of the committee members will know, who just try and railroad everything through. So what I worry about if we refuse this, the village hall contribution, potentially 92,400 is the village's calculation. Jim's calculation is 74,700. I think we'll kiss goodbye to those extras if it goes to appeal, because the applicant doesn't have to give there. The applicant doesn't have to give potentially to this bridge or a contribution to the bridge. The applicant doesn't actually have to also give those car parking spaces to the school. Doesn't have to do that. Probably will revise it when it gets to appeal. I've had lost appeals in my ward because of that. The play area, £6,000. Public parking, which I mentioned before. All these extra stuff. The whole thing about Walnut Close. What we're risking is the applicant to say, well, I'm not changing it anymore, and the appeal inspector can decide it. And it's a risk that we're delegating not here as us as decision makers, not to the parish councillors, not to those affected people, speaking to Mel and Chris Evans. We're going to ask somebody to come in from outside and decide it, is my concern, because it's going to go to appeal. This is because it just seems as if it's gone on far too long with all these niggles. That's the risk we're running if we vote for a refusal today. So I would rather trust the applicant, our officers, and the ward councillors and the community to get this right. Overall, I think about 95% of this is acceptable as a decision maker. It's not optimum. I think we're going to debate all that, but we're at serious risk if we refuse this of asking somebody else to decide it and losing all these extras that the developer is giving to the community that they don't have to. So I'll just make that point there.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Councillor Pritchett, I see your hand is raised.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your statement there, Councillor Higgins. There's a lot. I'm sitting here very uncomfortable about the bungalow, the last minute figures coming in for section 106, things to be tweaked, no real information to compare the 65 calculation to the 74, basics, blue tiles, chimneys, etc., etc. It seems to me here, as Mr. Worley has said, we've been brought to the table. It smacks to me as if there's been on our side, the council side, a project management failure to manage the project, and it's got delayed, and they've brought us to things have got brought to the table, and we don't seem to have learned the lessons from other situations where 90% is on a simple checklist that can be sorted. And I'm sat here today, and I could vote for this, and yet we don't know how far the offer is for the bungalow to be moved to number 2. And I wish to say as well, there's a lot about this application that complies with the local planning policy, and I am supportive to a great degree of it. And I'm saying this because of I need to be open with the local population, and you cannot drill into the nth degree in these and keep everybody happy, but you cannot go down, this property's got a bush here, can you have another bush opposite it? It's got to the point tonight with where I value everything the ward council have done, that you can only do so much, and you can't keep everybody happy, and you have to look at the biggest collateral damage like the bungalow. But as I say, my problem is I'm unhappy that it's like brought out the oven too soon, but I'm blaming our project management. There's things that have been done on other things, that haven't been addressed on here. So whilst I'm unhappy about it, I take note about everything that Councillor Higgins has said, and I'm supportive of that.
Could I just say that? Yeah, could I just say in response to that, on behalf of the officers, and I'm sure Jim Worley will join me, I think it's unfair to blame the project management element of this. It's the applicant who wants us to come to committee. And that was one of the first things that Mr. Worley actually said. So whether it's complete or incomplete, it was driven by the applicant. So, thank you. Councillor Brown. Oh, yes, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, okay.
I'm trying to keep looking at the other side of my screen. I'm missing names. Sorry, Councillor Brown, yeah.
Yeah, basically where I'm coming from in this is that I can see what everybody says. I think that listening to the debate tonight is why the applicant is taking this here at this stage when it's not ready. Why has the applicant been negotiating up to the end of this week to bring something forward? There's quite a lot wrong with this application. There's some really good stuff that's in the application. It's bringing a good settlement to the community, etc. It's but it is badly designed. You know, why not engage with the residents earlier, etc. in more detail? They're not the bigger issues. Yeah, hedges and all that is absolutely things that can be done when you're on site, etc. I'm sure with the willingness of the developer. But there's fundamentally key issues here, and we keep debating this in various meetings around, you know, like the transport situation has changed in the village. The mix I'm not relatively that happy with in relation to it. Just alone on D1, the car parking issues as well. The tandem car parking. I live I bought a house with tandem car parking recently, and there's only 2 of us, and it's a complete nightmare. I think if I was doing it again, I wouldn't buy that house, but that's my problem. But I can see some of the issues and everybody's parking on the road, etc. I do tend to think, put it back. You know, the village has spoken quite loudly that they don't like it. If the only option is to refuse it, we refuse it, and the village take their chance with it tonight, unless we can defer it. And I'd have to take some advice whether we could defer it or not. But fundamentally, the impact in relation to the house coming up to the hedge, etc., as well, and speaking to the local residents on the site visit, it's about good design. It's about getting it right first time. And this is, I think, it's just been too quick. And the road safety concerns do concern me. And yeah, it might meet minimum standards, but surely we're trying to meet more than minimum standards. Yeah. And I know it mightn't be, we might be afraid, but and we might be worried about appeals, etc. But this is about the application. Whatever we approve tonight is going to have a lasting impact for the next 100 years, 150 years on the village. But I do take into account what Councillor Higgins has said as well, is that there's risks with that. But what I'm hearing from the villages and from the speakers, and I presume they represent everybody, is that, you know, they're not happy with it. If they're not happy with it, and the only option is to refuse, well, I think I'll probably support that tonight.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Holmes, did you want to come back? You're on mute.
Yeah, for Councillor Higgins, and I don't want to have a battle with him. It's not worth it. Page 35, item 8, and obviously people have talked about sewers. That's all. I don't want to say anything else.
Thank you. Councillor Bindloss.
Yeah, just briefly, I just think that tonight there's just still too many unanswered questions. I would actually like also to see it deferred, but ultimately, you know, I just can't go along with this tonight because there's just too many questions that have still been that still need sorting out. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Faulkner.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Right at the start of the presentations, Mr. Worley basically said that it has been brought to us tonight because it was take it or leave it. Is what he said. Now, there's nothing there that said that the applicant was willing to look at anything if it was deferred. The applicant himself said, you know, if there's anything that needs changing, it's a little tweak here and a little tweak there. But we're saying it's not a little tweak here and a little tweak there. So I can't see that we have much option other than to refuse it. And it's a difficult one because I don't really want to refuse it. But there's too many things wrong for a deferment, in my opinion. And the applicant said, through Mr. Worley, take it or leave it. So are we going to accept it as it is, or are we going to leave it? That's the way I'm trying to weigh it up. I'm still, sitting on the fence at the minute.
It is a dilemma, I have to admit. Councillor Bindloss, you still have your hand raised. Did you want to? No, okay. And Councillor Falconer, if you can lower your hand if you've finished. I think. Got Councillor Higgins.
Yeah, it's just a point of clarification. Whether officers, as Councillor Holmes rightly said about point 8, Severn Trent advised that although our statutory sewer records do not show any public sewers, blah, 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 but it does go on to state, Severn Trent will seek to assist you in obtaining a solution which protects both the public sewer and the building. And what my point is that's Severn Trent's statutory job to do that. It's not a reason to refuse. That's all. But I do accept your point, Councillor Holmes, and what you're saying there.
Thank you. Right. Well, we've had a full debate on the application with a proposal to refuse. Now, in relation to flooding and the housing configuration, car parking, and Councillor Chandler has seconded that motion. Have I captured everything there, Councillor Holmes? The reasons for refusal?
Yeah.
Before we go any further.
And I feel that the way that the housing mix, obviously, the housing mix, because the lady who spoke, obviously, it would have been better to have actually talked to people, and there must be something there. We've had so many people, and obviously the ward councillors have worked so hard on this, and if you're working on things and you still keep putting up problems, that was really the reason that I don't believe we shouldn't have something at all. But this is why I asked in the first place Mr. Worley, because he has always said good planning is if there's this wrong, that wrong, you have to refuse it and start again. That's why I asked the question of him. And that's what I've always believed as long as I've been on the planning committee. That's what every other officer has said, even as far as Maurice Fairhurst, they've all said that. If there's so many things wrong, you can't defer it, you have to refuse it. That's all. And that's why I asked the question.
Okay, thank you. So it's contrary to the local plan regarding the housing mix and the housing configuration, basically, together with car parking and flooding.
Chair,
Higgins, you have your hand raised.
Could I just ask on the flooding part of the 3 points? Where is that based in? That's all I'm asking. Because I don't think we have any objection on flooding.
But we have, because some of the speakers that spoke about it, and if you probably don't go down to Statham very much, but there is a big water problem. There's a big ditch that goes down. And I think probably Councillor Hewson could tell you about that. I mean, all these things have to be got right. You don't, and he knows about this. It overflows down at the bottom. If the gardens are, and everybody wants a garden, they could all be flooded. I don't think anybody's looked at that. But it does say down here, number 9 as well, we were talking about. If we're going to get it right, we want to get it right, Councillor Higgins. I'm sure you agree that we all want to get this right, don't we?
But where is our evidence for flooding? Because the Environmental Agency, Severn Trent, and the Lead Flood Authority do not do not object and they don't raise anything like this. That's all I'm saying. If we're going on anecdotal residents, then that's obviously the reason. But that's all. Just before we vote.
I think if we're going to go down the road of flooding or down the river of flooding, we need to have sound evidence to back that up. Otherwise, that particular point for the refusal will fail.
Well, at the moment, then take it out. We know it does. We know it does. And as I said, Councillor Hewson would actually tell you because you have been talking to local councillors, I think, Councillor Hewson, have you not?
Councillor Hewson, do you want to respond?
Over the issues, then I spoke to the landowner next to the development, and he was just telling me about the mains pipe, which was one of his issues. But the hedge and the dike belongs to the development side. But he was actually saying he would sooner take on that hedge and dike so that he could manage the water then, because it's the developer will sort of like lose, once the developer sold the properties on, who's going to manage the hedge and the dike? And so
that would be a management company, I would imagine, who's doing the maintenance of the grounds.
Yeah, but he would say that he would sooner retain that himself so that he can manage his own. The dike is actually on his side of the land.
Yeah. Okay.
Just another point of clarification for me. If we said not to refuse it, but to actually defer, what does that involve actually? What is the difference if we actually say deferral rather than refusal? How does that break down the negotiation?
If we say deferral, then it will come back to committee at some point, and hopefully the developer will have addressed some of the issues that we've discussed this evening.
Thank you.
But that isn't guaranteed.
Thank you.
It is a risk. Mr. Worley, you've got your hand raised.
Thank you. Just Susan's final point there. The risk is the same because the applicant has a right of appeal either way, the same right of appeal. If we were down the deferral route, I'd want to come away tonight with a very definitive list of the things you want sorting, which may or may not be the same that Councillor Steadman was talking about, rather than something more nebulous and saying, make it better. We need to know exactly what we're targeting our discussion on.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pritchett, you've got your hand raised again.
Thank you, Chair. Pardon my inexperience on protocol. Do we know at this stage if there will be a motion to defer, or do we have to wait until this particular motion's voted on?
We have to go through this particular motion at the moment and then see that to the end, and then it depends on the outcome, then we might move forward to another one.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yeah. Thanks for the clarification there in the relation to deferral. If this motion is lost in relation to the refusal, I'm going to be more than happy to make a proposal to defer this application, because as I said, it's not that I'm against it completely. I want to see a good application come back, and that's what the community asked us for tonight. So now that we've had that clarification, I'll vote against the motion to refuse and hope that somebody, myself or somebody else, will propose a recommendation to defer.
Okay. Councillor Hewson, you still have your hand raised. Did you want to add anything? You're on mute, Councillor Hewson.
All the debate this evening seems to be over small things and so close to getting it right that if it could be done through a deferral rather than a refusal, that's my way of thinking at the minute. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Faulkner, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Chair. Just wanted to check with Councillor Holmes and Councillor Chandler, who seconded it, because Councillor Holmes indicated that she would take out the bit about
Yeah, I'm just about to go back to,
thank you.
clarify. Yeah. Did you have anything else to raise? Sorry, I cut you off. No, okay, thank you. Right, now here we are again. We have a motion in front of us to refuse, and we're taking out flooding, and it's to do with housing configuration and the housing mix and car parking. That is in conflict with the local plan.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
It is, yeah.
Thank you.
I would be happy to actually do a deferral, but all I'm saying is that I have always been told that if there are so many things wrong with it, then as I asked the chief planning officer, he always says refuse it and then you can come back and start again. That's the only reason. I'm quite happy to defer it, but that is what. And that's what that Mr. Worley's actually said, hasn't he? That it's bad planning to keep messing about. You either do something or you. That's what I've always been told.
Okay. Councillor Chandler, are you willing to agree to have the flooding element removed from the motion, from the proposal? You're on mute.
Most certainly, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
But I'm like Councillor Holmes. I mean, I did say an hour ago that this wanted deferring, and you said we were still in the discussion stage. But to me, it's not ready for a decision. And I'm quite happy if Councillor Holmes would withdraw her refusal. I'm quite happy to go for a deferral.
Yeah, I am. I'm fine. Happy. Yeah.
So you are willing to remove your proposal to refuse, and Councillor Chandler is willing to remove her seconding your motion to refuse. Right.
But we're both happy to propose and second a deferral.
Right. So that is the new proposal is to defer, but we do need some specifics in there for some.
Well, they're the same specifics, aren't they? Really, to defer. And also, I think, to work with the ward councillors who have done their best, stood upside down and whatever, to try and get it right. And if we don't get it right at that time, then we will refuse it, will we not?
Yeah.
Because we have to get it right for the people of Southern. We must get it right for them. We know all these villages have more houses than people want, but I'm afraid that we're living in this time that we have to do it. But if we're going to do it, it wants to be the best way and be as neighbourly as we possibly can, which a lot of these applications never seem to be.
Okay, so your motion is to defer.
Yeah.
But to defer what we've already got in front of us, but then to add to it the minor changes that have not been mentioned yet. But one or two of them, well, one of them is the plot 8.
Yes.
Redo that.
Yeah.
And anything else? There was about car parking, wasn't it?
It was car parking, also the maisonettes and those sort of things. There are so many things.
Okay.
But also to work with the ward councillors, which I think is absolutely essential.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we're looking for a seconder. Councillor Higgins, your hand is raised.
I've seconded it.
I was going to say, I think Councillor Chandler seconded it.
Right, you're seconding it. Sorry, I must have missed that. So it's been proposed to defer, to look at the fine tuning of it, basically. I think that's what we're talking about. And Councillor Chandler has seconded that motion. Yes. Councillor Higgins, did you want to add anything?
No, and I'd like to thank the proposer and seconder on putting forward a deferment there. to the proposal second, if I've got some of this right, is plot 8, which I agree with. I think that needs looking at, and I think the applicant is certainly looking for that. There's some with 3-car tandem parking, which I think we all accepted, and I think Councillor Holmes has put that well. There was talk about losing the buffer zone for some parking, and again, I think that's part of the deferment debate between
Parking.
applicant and ward councillor. What I think could be a beneficiary in terms of nailing this down is to discuss the a contribution to a connecting bridge, because I think that will save this detachment from the village. And I think, bearing in mind that there are things which the housing mix I think we all agree isn't at its best. The affordable housing grouping isn't what we normally like, but as listening to the applicant on there, and obviously through Mr. Worley, they are looking to do a contribution to the village hall. I think Mr. Worley's calculation of 74,748 is right, but to allay my concerns of the housing mix, and Councillor Holmes, if you agree with this, I think the ward councillors and the applicant to discuss 92,400 with the villagers, and I think if we defer on those, I think that's 5 points, and I think we can move on. I think the maisonettes, as Councillor Holmes said, was to swap it around, was it, Mr. Worley?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, the maisonette down the bottom of track.
Yeah.
And if, with your permission, Councillor Holmes, if I've put that into what you agree with, I would very much back you there.
Can I just say, can you hear me? Am I still on the line?
You're still live.
There was something there with libraries. I didn't know whether that was necessary, so we could have put it to the village hall instead. I know I've seen this contribution to libraries. What I think, well, I don't know where the library, we wouldn't.
It's the mobile library.
Oh, right, I see. Oh, right.
It's the mobile library that comes around every 3 weeks.
Right, that's fine. I didn't know. I didn't realise, because we don't have one now. So it's sort of, yeah. All right.
So I think Councillor Holmes, if with those, I think we've secured something really good for the village. They'll get some extra benefits than what the minimums are. Though I agree with you, the housing mix and the grouping of affordable housing is at the very edge of acceptability. So I think it's a compromise. It's a compromise for us. And I'd just like to put on record, congratulations to all the parties involved, but also the ward councillors for the work they've done on this. And I do believe the applicant will get this secured for the village. I don't believe they want to build rubbish. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Pritchett, you have your hand raised.
Thank you. I'd like to support the list that Councillor Higgins has brought forward, but I'll go back to the applicant earlier about the bridge, and knowing Stavern and the location of facilities and stuff, I'm not too sure what that offers. But I don't want to get into this position. Councillor Higgins has listed 5 things that Councillor Worley, specific items. I'm not supportive of going back to talk to the parish council in detail for a never-ending, you alter the masonette here, so they're not happy with the bush here. I don't want to. I'm not supportive of that. We get, we go with this list. So I differ from Councillor Holmes on that one, to be specific. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, do we just need to be a bit specific and maybe just refer it back to really we're talking about mainly quite a bit around policy D1?
Right, okay.
Just to actually, so that we're quite specific what we're talking about, if that makes sense, that we're actually referring back to policy.
Provides the context for most.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. Just making sure we talk about it. Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you, Mr. Worley.
just saying D1, to my mind, provides the context for most of this that we're talking about.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, so that we can conform to the local plan, basically.
Yeah. Chair, I just wanted to make sure that we were actually clear and we had actually referred to it. And
yeah,
that makes
okay.
sense. Yeah.
Thank you. Right. Any other comments before we go on to the new vote, which is to defer? I'm referring to the to include the ward councillors going forward to make minor adjustments to this, basically to adjustments to it, to include something to do with plot 8, as in to mitigate the impact onto Walnut Close, to address the car parking, the triple car parking, and car parking in the buffer zone, connecting bridge, affordable housing, all items that can generally be included in policy D1 of the local plan, where we feel that improvements to those will make it comply further with D1 and make it fit better with D1. Thank you very much. Right, so we'll go to the vote now on my alphabetical list. I'll go through the list individually as we normally do. The first one is Councillor Bindloss. Are you in favour of deferral in line with the recommendations of Councillor Holmes and Chandler?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Chandler?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Faulkner?
4.
Councillor Glancy? 4. Councillor Hewson?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Higgins?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Posnett?
4.
Thank you. And Councillor Pritchett?
4.
Thank you. That's unanimous. So this application is deferred, and hopefully when it comes back, we'll have all these snags addressed. Thank you. Councillor Pritchett, do you have your hand raised?
Yes, before we move on, Madam Chair, in respect of the Section 106 contributions, and in particular the county council aspects for transport and education, will we be discussing those at the deferment, which I hope is a conclusion?
Well, I dare say when it comes back, we'll still have the same conditions on there, so we can fully thrash them out then. Okay, thank you.
Chair.
Thank you. Right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for that item. If you'd like to call, you've already done it. I can see.
It exhausted me watching that.
It is, yes, it is exhausting, but we got there in the end, and I think, yeah. Right, the next item is 4.2, which is 20/00823, which is a full application. Officer, it's 42 Avon Road in Melton Mowbray, 41 Avon Road, Melton Mowbray. 42 Avon Road, sorry, I've got a spelling mistake here. If officers like to address the committee on this particular one.
Sorry, it's me again.
Mr. Worley again.
Louise, could we go straight to the presentation on this one if you're still with us? Hi, so the whole context of this application is the appeal decision to which the report refers to many times and indeed quotes great big chunks from. So it received a refused appeal decision, and the applicants have sought, I'm choosing that word really carefully, sought to address those reasons by the changes that they've made. And your key judgment is basically whether you think they have achieved that, whether they've done enough to overcome them. So this first diagram shows old versus new, and particularly the diagram on the right with its various colours shows the differences. Sorry, that's the new configuration. You can see by the grey hatch by comparison to the grey hatch on the left, the differences that it's made in terms of forward projection towards Avon Road itself, the length of that rear extension, and the wraparound to the rear of number 42 itself. If we can move on, please, Louise. So this was something that attracted a lot of attention from the inspector. She described the former application, which is the one on the left, as being over bulky and as a result over dominant in the street scene as opposed to on any individual property. And the applicant's response is what you see on the right. So they've tried to break down this big new gable end that was the dominating feature by breaking it down into two parts, recessing it, we'll see more on the next page, and retaining the lean-to arrangement. So you can see there on the right that the new gables are now the same size, or in fact ever so slightly smaller than the existing gable. That's the rear. I don't think we need to particularly concentrate on that, but on the right you can see the lean-to arrangement. But this is a very important slide. Forward one, please, Louise. Yeah, this is a very important slide. So I think I've lined them up correctly. Yeah. So above, you can see how far it was going. Thanks, Louise. Right up to that front elevation, and you can see how it's pared back because they're up, so that the two-story element is about 2 meters further back this time. Exactly there. Thank you. And that's lean-to. And rather helpfully on the lower one, you can see how that compares with the backdrop of its neighbour, Derwent Drive, 30 Derwent Drive, whose occupant we'll hear from in a short while. So it's gone back about 2 meters in an attempt to address the comments made by the inspector about projecting further forward, and she coined the phrase this staggered building line. So again, your judgment is it still interfering with that staggered building line in an unacceptable way, as was found to be the case last time? Next one, thanks, Louise. All the same points, but just depicted as floor space on this occasion. Again, I've tried to line up these slides so you can see old on the left and new on the right. And again, looking at the front, the bottom, you can see that stepping back compared to how it used to be.
Thank you. Is that, have you completed your report?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, right, sorry, I've just a bit of a sort of pregnant pause then, sorry. Do we have any questions for Mr. Worley? I've got one question. There was one slide that you showed, and you said the property was Derwent Drive or Derwent Road, and it was the side elevation where you saw how far the proposal came out in comparison to the one next door. I think the one next door was actually on the other side of the property. That's Avon Road, so it wasn't actually Derwent, which is the speaker that we're going to hear later on. Did you want to put that slide up again, please?
Yeah. So number 30 Derwent Drives is next to number 42 Avon Road.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yes. So that backdrop, that's the Derwent Drive property.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think that's Avon Road.
No, that's you looking up the street with 42 Avon Road in the foreground, so to speak. 40 Avon Road is, we wouldn't see anything, and 30 Derwent Drive forming the backdrop.
So that's looking down, is it?
Well, it's up from, as you go down that slope away from these properties. So looking back on yourself.
Yeah.
It shows levels, the horizontal line as well, because as well as staggered back to front, they're staggered in terms of climbing the hill.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. It's just that 30 Derwent Drive is further forward, isn't it? I'm looking at the picture, the sort of drawing on page 40. It would look to me that the bottom, the drawing on the bottom, relates to Avon Road, 42 and 44 Avon Road. Mind you, I've never been very good at reading plans, so perhaps I've got it round the wrong way.
Yeah, on page 30. If you follow the numbers on page 30, you can see the 30 underneath the application site, and it's stepping forward, which is the same as what we're looking at on the screen, but from the other direction.
Right, okay. Don't give me a plan to get me home, that's all I can say. Or a map to get me home. Right, Councillor Higgins, do you have a question?
I do, but on reflection, I think if I'll probably reserve it until after all the speakers and ask the officers.
Yeah, okay then. Right, we have two speakers this evening, and the first one is Mr. Chris Ward, who is an objector, and he lives at the property next door, which is 30 Derwent Drive. If you can, Mr. Ford, he's on mute at the moment. Natasha. Good evening, Mr. Ward.
Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome. I'm sorry to have kept you. It's been quite
it's been a very long wait.
It has. I do apologise.
No, you no need to at all.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Ward.
Yep. Shall I start now?
Start when you're ready.
I'm going to start now. My name is Chris Ward of 30 Derwent Drive, neighbour to Mr. and Mrs. Abrahams of 42 Avon Road, who want permission to extend their property. The whole process has been very upsetting to my wife and I. We are 72 and 68. The process has gone on for over a year. It was not helped by the case officer only speaking to us once, who put us at a great disadvantage. We went to the council planning committee, who listened to both sides for extension and against extension, finding in favour of against extension 7-2. Reasons: over-intensive use of site by virtue of width, mass and forward projection of the proposed extension. Also, please, the fire evacuation plan. They had blocked off the side kitchen door. They want to come within 6 inches of my retaining wall. If fire broke out and persons are in lift, there is no escape, only into the back garden, which is no escape. It's blocked by hedges and fences. And my deeds also allow me to maintain and repair my wall. My neighbours then took the extension to the inspectorate, who dismissed the appeal, ruling I consider that the proposal would be unduly large and dominant and would stand out as an unsympathetic and out-of-place feature in the street scene that would detract from the established residential character and pattern of the development in this part of Avon Road. The inspectorate commented on the poorly twins and the mother. She drew the conclusion there are benefits of the proposal which count in its favour. However, even taken together, they are insufficient and outweigh the harm that would be caused in relation to the first main issue in this case and the proposal's conflict with the development plan in this regard. The new proposal of the planning application seemed to be disrespectful to the council planning committee and the inspectorate. The reduction is very minimal. The inspectorate said unduly large and dominant and out of place feature in Avon Road. The council planning committee said it was a fire hazard and they have took no notice whatsoever.
30 seconds.
My wife tried to compromise finding a solution for both sides, which they would not compromise. We're old people and don't understand the process. The inspectorate said if you want to alter the outcome, you should consider obtaining legal advice. Only the High Court can quash this decision. We are completely lost. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions of Mr. Ward? Mr. Higgins, sorry, Councillor Higgins, you have your hand raised.
No, that's okay. I think one of us called, we promoted Jim to a councillor on the last one. So I noticed he chuckled away there. And yeah, thank you, Mr. Ward, for that. Just a point in terms of anything you need to take to a judicial review would be a decision, a positive decision if a permission was given, as it was a refusal. And it went in the favour you were looking for, you don't have to do that. It's if a decision's made that is in conflict to what you want, if you feel that's necessary. Just on that as well is you said about compromise and the last 2 or so hours was a lot of compromises. There's clearly a desire to expand or extend on this house anyway. What are the compromises that you would seek, and have you sought them with the next door neighbour? And
I wrote a letter of telling them where we would compromise. I gave it to Mr. Worley, who gave it to my neighbours, and they turned them all down. We was quite prepared to compromise, but they just won't compromise. They want everything their own way.
Okay, I mean, it is always for applicants to. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the applicant's application. They're free to do that. But thank you for that. Maybe Mr. Worley will. I see he's got his hands up, Chair. So that does answer a question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Higgins.
Thank you. Mr. Worley, do you want to respond?
Yeah, just to clarify what Mr. Ward was just describing there in his answer to Councillor Higgins on the last application. He's done similar on this application, and through me made a request that if the side boundary of the extension was moved across the away from the boundary, he would probably not be objectionable, but that was declined as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Steadman.
Sorry,
do you have a
yes,
question for Mr. Ward?
Just a quick question for Mr. Ward. He says his deeds, he has the right to go onto the property next door to maintain his wall. Is this the retaining wall that we looked at on our last site visit to this property?
Absolutely.
I thought we were talking about the same one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I could. Sorry.
No.
I could read the deed. I mean, the detail is only 2 lines long, and it's in my deeds. I could read that to you if you want me to.
I'm not. Well, you can do, but I'm not sure if that's a planning consideration. The deeds of your house, to be honest.
No. It won't take me 20 seconds. Any wall dividing any building erected or to be erected on the property, hereby conveyed from any building erected or to be erected on any adjoining property, shall be a party wall and forever repairable and maintainable as such. And she wants to come in with 150 metres, 6 inches. You just can't retain it or repair it. Okay. Thank you for that anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Thank you. That's clarified. That stay there, Mr. Ward. I may have another question for you. Councillor Bindloss.
Good evening, Mr. Ward.
Good evening, Mr. Bindloss.
Just a point of clarity, really. So there's potentially going to be just 6 inches between your property and number 42. Am I correct in that? Yeah. And
yes, you are.
What percentage would you say of your property that will be accessible due to that 6 inches? What length of the wall of your house, for example?
I wouldn't be able to repair it or retain it at all. It just stops everything.
It's going to preclude you from doing any maintenance to that side of your house.
And I have maintained it twice because it is my retaining wall. Not with these neighbours, but with neighbours before, because it started to crack and it's my retaining wall, so I had to repair it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bimbo.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes, do you have a question of Mr. Ward?
Yes, Mr. Ward. If I could ask you, you did mention about a fire hazard.
Yeah.
Now, when I went to have a look, I went to the front of that house and I went round the corner to the next street because there are bungalows there, and looked back.
Right.
And it looked to me as though it's so tight. Everything in there is tight. Have you got much of a garden? You know, a big garden, or because?
I mean, I don't know what you class as a big garden. You did come in it, and you commented on how nice my flowers were.
Yeah. Yeah. But
I don't know what you class as a big garden. I wouldn't think I had a big garden.
No,
I mean, it's adequate for me and my wife.
What I'm trying to get at is that you said about a fire hazard, and so what you're really saying, this sort of is fully onto the plot, is it, on the next door's plot? This is what I'm saying. You know,
if I could answer you, Mrs. Holmes, it was I don't know the councillor's name, but I think it's a councillor Chandler. Chandler, have I got it right?
Yes.
And it was her last time who, I never even thought about a fire hazard, but it was Councillor Chandler who said with blocking the kitchen door up and with coming within 6 inches and having old people in the lift, the only way out was at the back. And if you went out at the back, then there's no escape because it's just fenced and it's hedged and you just can't get out, and they're older people.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for saying that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Did you have another question, Councillor Bindlos, because your hand is still raised?
Apologies.
Okay, thank you. Don't worry. Don't worry. Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ward.
Thank you very much indeed, anyway.
Okay, thank you. The next speaker this evening is the applicant, Mrs. Julie Abrams. Good evening, Mrs. Abrams. You're on mute at the moment.
Hello.
Good evening. Sorry to have kept you waiting. It's been quite a long meeting this evening.
That's okay, thank you.
So you have 3 minutes to address the committee.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for giving me the time to speak. The build has become necessary due to family members' health and the need for more permanent care for my mum to be put in place to help everyday living on both sides to become easier and more manageable and enjoyable. The extra bedroom is needed to give overnight respite care for my twin nephews with autism and other healthcare issues. Both these can be verified by health professional letters sent in with the planning application. The extra bedroom is needed to hold the medical equipment and toys, as the boys spend a lot of time with us and need routine and familiarity. The revised planning application we're putting forward has been reduced in size at the front and also reduced in bulk, so as not to impact on the street scene. The revised plans have been kept in the staggered building line, which we were told was lost in the last plans. Although not a planning issue, due to the concerns Mr. Ward has with the retaining wall of 30 Derwent Drive, I want to bring to your attention we have asked a structural engineer to come and have a look at the situation. But we're also told there are alternative solutions for the wall, which would not be exposed. That would mean the wall would not be exposed and in turn would not need to be maintained. This is a cost we're willing to cover if this solution was to go ahead. We've also had a point brought to our attention by our neighbour 44 Avon Road. It's regarding the side-facing window onto 44 Avon Road's driveway. We've worked out a solution with the neighbour, which he's now happy with, and a revised plan has been sent to the inn, and the window has been relocated and opaque glazing has been put in. We hope we've met all the requirements for the planning and hopefully you can approve the application set out in front of you. Thank you. Could I also bring to your attention that the wall that Mr. Ward is talking about is a retaining wall. It's not his house wall. Also that there was a mention about fire risk within the house, and upstairs the two houses, it's not a separate dwelling. There is a walkway through from the bedroom, so it is the house is a main, it's an annex, it's within the house. And we also do have a sidewalk down the house. The house isn't the bulk of the house. We still have a sidewalk down the side of our house. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Thank you.
It's Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Mrs. Abrams, for this succinct presentation. The particular issue with the neighbour at number 30 of your wall coming to within 6 inches of this dividing wall, within that 6 inches there will be some guttering, will there not? And a downpipe. Because there'll have to be a guttering and downpipe from looking at the diagram that will come within those 6 inches. That's one point. The second point is, how do you propose to build and maintain your property if you don't have the permission of your neighbour to go over and do it? And I speak from experience with some issues here in Huddersfield on that one. Thank you.
Did you want to respond, Mrs. Abrams?
Oh, okay. Well, there's lots and lots of properties around the neighbourhood here that have had this done. And I was told by the structural engineer that this is a possible build and there are ways around it. He's totally been put in the picture that this is a possibility that won't ever be able to go on to Mr. Ward's land. And I've been told that we can maintain the house and this can be done. So I'm told that it can be done, and that's what I have to go on.
Thank you.
Chair, through you, may I just provide a little bit of clarity here that whilst the issue that Mr. Ward raised is a very valid issue, it's not actually a material planning consideration. So I just wanted members to be reminded of that.
It is. Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, and thank you, Kieran, for that, because I think we could be going down rabbit holes on this retaining wall and rights and things like that. Miss Abrahams, I think you were talking about the family situation, and I know 3 minutes you've got a lot of other things to try and go through. Can you try and just convey in terms of for the extra space that you're asking the committee to consider, how that would help with the family, or how would the family use this building, and in consideration of that, how would anybody else use this building, subject to, say, if you moved or whatever? So how does this new building relate
The reason we need, at the moment, mum's not sort of living with us, it would be my mum that would move in. At the moment, to give you an example, with mum not living with us, we're always up there, either my husband's up there trying to help her, or I'm up there helping. To move my mum in with us would bring us as a family back together. It would mean that obviously we're not always going up to mum, and my husband's not there and I'm not there, and it will bring us back as a family together. I have 2 children of my own, and it would just mean that I would be with them. I mean, it would just be great to have our family back together instead of us all being spread out, having to look after my mum, which sounds awful. I mean, obviously, that's what we need to do, and that's what has to be done. But to have mum here means she would get better care, because we'd be able to look after her better, and it would mean that we would spend more time as a family back again.
Thank you. Just for that is
I hope that's the question.
No, that was helpful to me. Thank you. I won't reveal the personal details. I won't reveal the personal details that the committee have seen through the letters I think you've supplied to the officers, which has been helpful. But if I say that the travelling distance from your house to your mum's house is about 10 minutes in a one-way direction, would you say that's about right?
A good day.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was as the crow flies, so to speak. I know if there was various traffic issues, but would you say at a minimum it would take you about 10 minutes to get to your mum's address? I won't say the address though.
Sorry, I only got the 10 minutes, but I can sort of get the gist of what you're asking. Is it only takes sort of 10 minutes to get to her address?
Yeah, that was what I was asking. So in a one-way direction. Would you say that's correct?
It's really breaking up, but I understand that's what you're sort of asking, that it takes 10 minutes. Yes, it does take 10 minutes, but the sort of things that she struggles with is open jars and things like that. So it's the everyday. I mean, I know you're in possession of the doctor's letters and things. I brought those over to you because obviously it's one thing for me to say, my parents need help, or well, my parent needs help, or the nephews need this, the nephews need that. It's very easy for me to sit here and say, this is why I need the build. But I thought, you know, hopefully by getting some background evidence to show you exactly what it is we need, that's not me sort of sitting here saying that's what it needs. And to be honest, if I did need this build, knowing upsets next door are, or you know, it's necessary build. It's something that has come around due to my father passing away, and it's something, you know, is a must for us to come back as a family and try and move forward and just make it so easier for us as a family to do. Yes, Mum is 10 minutes away, but as the Melton traffic, as you as planners know than anybody, that can actually turn into a 45-minute one way. It could be a 20-minute back, another. That takes an hour out of my family time, perhaps an hour with Mum. That's 2 hours out of my family time.
Thank you.
If Mum was
That
next
was really
door, that's 2 hours that I could hear.
That
I
was
hope
really
that
helpful.
answers the question.
Yeah, it really does. That's very helpful.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Councillor
it's
Holmes.
breaking up again.
Yeah. Councillor Holmes, do you have a question?
Well, it was just for our legal representative, as you said that drains and things were not material. I appreciate
I think Kieran was referring to the party wall, to be honest,
the party wall, yeah,
and the covenant in the deed.
I just wondered if what Mrs. Abrahams, and I appreciate what she's saying, whether that is material as well. That was all. I didn't know what was all material for planning. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking. If I can ask Kieran about that, please.
Do you want to respond, Kieran?
I think, Councillor Holmes, the report sets out everything that is material for you to consider today.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, any questions of Mrs. Abrams?
Do indeed, yes. Mrs. Abrams, I think reading the report is that I believe is that you'll also need a space to bring carers in for your mother. Is that correct?
I'm really sorry. I've got such a bad connection. I haven't had the last three people speak. I don't know if you can try and repeat again.
Yeah, I can. The question I have is, I've got two questions. I'll start with the first one. The first question is, I think I've read in the report that there's a comment made that you're bringing in 2 carers to look after your mother. Is that correct?
No.
Or did I misread that somewhere?
That's something to do with my mum. I'm sorry. Could you try and repeat it again?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'll move on. No, never mind. And
No.
the second question I had is, how often will your nephews be staying there? Will it be permanently every day, or is it just ad hocly?
No, I'm really sorry. I can't hear.
Right. I think the Councillor Brown was asking how often your nephews stay with you overnight. No, we can't hear. I think we'll have to move on.
Okay, that's fine, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mrs. Abrams. Thank you very much for attending this evening.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Chair, just on that, I don't know if it's beyond any realms or whatever, but if there was a more secure because obviously we're on voice over IP and the internet, is whether one of the officers, if there's either a connection somewhere else because they sounded very important questions. And if it's a connection issue, I wouldn't really want to, my view would be, I'd want to know what the answer was to them. So I don't know if there's any way around it.
Right. Natasha, can we improve the connection at all?
Anything that I can suggest, Councillor Glancy, if you were willing to do this, would be to, if Mrs. Abrams could disconnect and try and connect again, because that sometimes does.
It clears it,
solve,
doesn't it?
Yeah, connectivity issues. So whether you be, if you were willing to give her the time to try to do that.
Yes, more than willing to do that. Mrs. Abrams, do you want to try to disconnect and reconnect at all?
Oh, he's telling me to disconnect.
Yeah. And then try again. It might improve your connection.
Priya, can you hear? Priya, are they telling me to leave? Are they telling me to leave? Okay. How?
And to reconnect if you can.
And to reconnect.
Perhaps might help if somebody phones her.
Councillor Glancy, I'm just currently looking for Mrs. Abrams reconnecting again, but it just might take her a few seconds to do that.
Yes, okay. We'll just wait a moment.
Hopefully, if there's a relative or a friend or supporting person of hers can hear or whatever, and they have the number, maybe to give her a call and to make sure she knows to reconnect, I suppose, because we can't.
Yes, we've just said that. She did repeat it.
Yeah,
so
well,
she's aware.
Councillor Glancy, can I make a suggestion that whilst we're waiting for Mrs. Abrams, we are coming towards the cut-off time for the meeting, and I wonder whether you could now propose to extend it if you were minded to do so. I'm just thinking whilst we were waiting.
Well, I think we're probably going to have to, aren't we? Because we are getting.
We've got 13. Yes,
we've got 13 minutes.
13 minutes. Yes.
So right. Are members willing to go beyond the 9 o'clock curfew for this? I would like to propose that we do, so that we complete our business this evening. And I'm looking for a seconder on this, please. Councillor Tossett.
I'm happy to second that.
Right.
Yeah.
Are we all in favour? Do I have to go through them alphabetically, or can we just generally accept that we're all in favour unless somebody has any misgivings on it?
And
if yes, I think that's fine, Councillor Glancy. If members can indicate by raising their hand if they have an objection to.
Oh no, I haven't got an objection to it. So
no.
I take it that we are all in agreement, unless you raise your hand objecting, Councillor Higgins. You have your hand raised. Are you?
No, I'm fine. I was just saying it's 10 o'clock for Jim. 9 o'clock for us, 10 o'clock for Jim.
Well, life begins late in France anyway. He'll be fine.
I think he's got wine in that mug he's drinking from anyway.
I think a nice glass of cold gamay, I think.
I wouldn't blame him if he was, but dedication. Yeah. Thank you for attending on your holiday, Jim.
There we go. Hello again.
Yes, hi. I'm back on. I can hear you.
Oh, well done. Brilliant. Thank you. Councillor Ronan, Councillor Ronan Brown, do you want to ask your questions straight away now, while we have a good connection?
Yes, two questions, Ms. Abrams. First question is, presume your mum's going to move in with you permanently, and is she going to have the reason, or somebody mentioned that she's going to have carers, and that's one of the reasons why you've put the lift, etc. in?
No, she's not going to have carers. The reason we put the lift in is due to I spoke to the GP, to her GP, and the lift is there. Really, she does struggle with the stairs. I won't tell lies. She does struggle with the stairs, and obviously with the design, we've looked to the future. I mean, obviously we don't want to put stairs in and then decide that we need to put a lift in. So we've looked to the future with the design, and we've put a lift in there ready for, obviously, if she when she does need the lift. That's why the lift has gone in.
Okay. And my second question is, there's mention of 2 nephews coming to stay. Do they stay with you permanently, or will they be with you every day? Is that the reason? And what adaptations or what part of the build has been done to accommodate their needs?
They will stay with me. They'll stay with me for respite. They have autism, and my sister has been recommended that she doesn't take the boys on holiday with her. This is due to the boys don't travel very well. Having autism, they don't travel very well to unfamiliar places, so they do very well at having respite. But with them not having sort of limited conditions, they can't go into respite care. So that's why I'd like the extra bedroom, because obviously they can have respite care here with myself, and have the extra bedroom. We're only a 3-bedroom, which means at the moment, when they do come here, they have to sleep on my bedroom floor, which isn't ideal. You know, so having the extra bedroom, we'll be able to continue that. And they do come in the week as well. I do help her out, because obviously they are hard work. Having 2 autistic children is extremely hard work, as I'm sure you can appreciate.
Thank you. Right, has that completed the questions for Mrs. Abrams? Okay, so thank you very much for that. We'll move you to the attendees, but thank you for sort of signing in again. It's obviously made it a little bit clearer for us.
Thank you.
We had a statement, members. We had a statement from the ward councillor, and Democratic Services sent this out. Does everybody receive it? And you have read it? Does any?
No. Yes, I can confirm that, Chair.
Right. Who hasn't read it? No. Right. So does that mean I've got to read it out now then?
No.
Right. It's only very brief. So it's a statement on behalf of the ward councillor, Councillor Wood. He says the redrawn application for the extension of 42 Avon Road has demonstrated a smaller mass on the front elevation, which is a clear reaction to the failed appeal process undertaken in relation to the original application. I need to put the light on. Yeah, failed application. However, the new application still comes up to within 150 millimetres of the party wall with 30 Derwent Drive. The deeds for 30 Derwent Drive state that access to the party wall must be retained in perpetuity, and obviously to allow the extension to sit only 150 millimetres away from this wall would not allow such access. The deeds for 30 Derwent Drive have been submitted to the planning department and have been forwarded to Democratic Services to allow a legal view to be taken on their contents. Therefore, would it be possible to defer a decision on this application until legal advice is forthcoming? Response from Legal and Governance Manager Kieran Stockley states, I can confirm that this is essentially a private matter between the 2 parties and not a material consideration that the Planning Committee can or should take into account.
Thank you.
I'm afraid there's no questions for Councillor Wood because he's not here to answer them. So that completes the speakers this evening. Officers, Mr. Wally, do you want to come back with anything this evening on what you've heard?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
I'm done, thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions of Mr. Worley before we start the debate? Councillor Higgins.
Yeah, so I was going to ask it a bit earlier, but I thought I'd just hear the speakers. So it's one to Jim on it. Is obviously we've heard a bit about personal circumstances and 3 other family members that aren't currently living there. What would your advice be in terms of how much weight we attribute to that, in terms of, obviously there's the D1 reason for refusal and the inspector's report, because obviously there could be a balance on that of how much people are minded, and we have had one letter from a doctor regarding one particular person, and we've had another letter which I think is just a health visitor, which isn't a doctor or a nurse. But so, what would your advice be, and how much weight we need to attach to those? Thank you.
I hope this isn't a non-answer, but this is where you have the privilege of determining for yourselves individually and collectively how much weight to assign, in exactly the same way the inspector did. And as you will have noted, the inspector concluded rather modestly and thought that the design issues were more weighty.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Right, members, over to you to debate. Who wants to be first? Oh, Councillor Higgins.
I'll kick it off because no one else was going to. So
no.
Yeah, just summing up. I'll just on the personal circumstances, and I think from, as we know, and some members were nodding. I think if you do make it from this house to the mum's address, 10 minutes is at best, I suppose. And I know some councillors who represent that area know what it's like. I won't reveal the place, but obviously, traffic in Melton, even if we had the bypass, it's still going to take 10 minutes at the very least. And there is the things of, with my own grandfather, I only was round the corner from him, and just to walk round the corner, that could have been difficult sometimes when, my granddad. Well, some of you would know my granddad would never tell me he was ill, and then you'd have to go round I've been ill, and you're like, oh, why didn't you tell me? I only round the corner. So, and it is those things to help them, with those little issues, and it can take, a large part of your life up from time to time. So I do understand and have huge empathy with that, and having grandparents very close to you, I think, is a fantastic thing. And obviously the family is very close, and so I think that's obviously a merit for it. Is this the right design for the area? Could it have been more sympathetically made? I think it's certainly up for debate, and I'm going to listen to that. Just that said, I am not against the expansion of this particular house. Is this, as we've said before, is it all there for a permit, or do members have concerns and it's a refusal? Is the design, too much? And I think that's where we are on it, really. So I just wanted to put those points across. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Peter, Councillor Faulkner next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. To me, it just looks like a bit of the front has been taken off and put round the back. So in my mind, it's still a vast over-intensive use of the site. And I understand all the reasons why they want the extension, but I just think it's over-intensive on the site. And I'm not happy with it at all. But I'll listen to other people's views as well.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I when I went and I looked at the site, and then I went round the corner, and I am concerned that it is such an over-intensive area to that. That's why I mentioned the garden. I mean, obviously I couldn't see behind it, but it just looked vast. And I have concerns that, funnily enough, when Councillor Higgins was talking about people being closer to other people, my an old aunt and uncle who now are dead, they lived just a bit further along in a bungalow. Now they moved so that they were actually on the flat, because my uncle suffered from a debilitating disease that he couldn't walk very well and had to be pushed in a wheelchair. Now, looking at that site, as you looked at it, that in itself, it's on a hill, And I don't think, to me, it looks as though it would be jolly hard work to be pushing somebody in there. You know, I have obviously got to say, and I feel like Councillor Faulkner, it is over-intensification of the site. I totally understand the problems, but I also am worried about the safety angle, because it's so narrow to get along there. You know, we mentioned fire, the gentleman mentioned fire. My goodness, if somebody was elderly, they were living there, and I'm not saying they are at the moment, or you've got poor disabled children, and there was a fire. It's so worrying. It has happened. It happened in Melton some time ago. Happened to know the lady who died, and that was because there was somebody disabled and they couldn't get them out. And it just worries me. It worries me terribly. But I do have sympathy for the lady. Don't think I don't. I do. But I think it's over-intensification of the site, and I don't think it's in the right place. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, you're next.
Yeah, probably following on from what the last bit of comments that Councillor Higgins had said, is that we're talking about quite a, you know, it's really a large intensification of a site that's, you know, that was originally built for something like a bit smaller you could probably accept, but for the actual site itself, I just think this is very large, etc. And you know, in the day-to-day work I do, you know, I do work with disabled people. That's what I do for a living. I work with autistic young people and adults, and what we tend to do is look for property that's actually suited to the needs, etc. And that's to do with older people as well. So it's about bringing it into the right place and purchasing the right house. But coming back to this, just looking at it really from a D1 perspective, you know, for the design, the layout, the impact it has on the local environment, etc. I just think it's too much, and I'm going to struggle really to support it for that. I do have sympathy with the family, etc. I have a young lad myself who'd spent, and we had to assist for the first year of his life with various adoptions, etc. But you do tend to then adopt your life and make your choices to suit that. And it might be different if there's people living in the house with the conditions, but it is a much more over intensification than what I think should happen in the area, having visited the site, etc. So at the moment, that's my current views.
Thank you. Councillor Pritchett.
Thank you very much, Chair. The report was very good. The applicant has addressed the inspector's concerns. Mr. Wall has explained there's been some development with the neighbour and the frosted glass window. Kieran's explained the in terms of planning terms, the issue about the wall, regardless of the practicalities for both sides. Now, looking at the diagram in the papers and the concerns that have come forward from Councillor Holmes, that if you look at number 44, they're built to the border and they've only got the same amount of pathway down the side for a start. So it's not so that they're in that position already. And if this is to scale, the garden at the back is a plot larger than the house in the front. And the building, to me, has a long life. I'm disregarding at the moment the current stated requests for it, and I'm sort of looking at it straightforward from planning terms. And I'm not too sure how relevant it is to make judgments as to the type of house a disabled person should live in, or whether it's on a hill or they shouldn't. And I do take into account judgments on an over-imposing site, but in terms of the planning, I'm struggling to see a good reason for refusal. End.
Thank you. Councillor Steadman.
Thank you, Chair. I remember this application from the first time round, all I seem to be hearing tonight are the same arguments again of over-intensification of the site, and we're back yet again to policy D1. I view policy D1 as being a very strong policy in the Melton local plan, and I'm asking myself, am I prepared to go against the strength of this policy on the evidence provided? I would really like to see the applicant actually talk to Mr. Ward and sort out these problems between them. Because, you know, we're just getting to the stage where it's just going backwards and forwards like a yo-yo. I'm looking either towards a defer or refuse on this again for the same reasons, over intensification of the site, etc. And you know, if we refuse it or defer it tonight, I would like it to see it come back with some dialogue between the neighbours, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Ward, in his 3 minutes, mentioned my comments at the last meeting when it was refused about the fire hazard. And to me, that fire hazard has not gone away by this amended application. And we've got children, we've got elderly people, and I think we should take this fire thing very seriously. I went up Dovedale Road, Dovedale Close, and looked down, and it is very highly intensive, all the building down there. And I would just hate to think how you would get a fire tender if you'd got a raging fire, because electrical faults and things like that, it goes up in next to no time. I've seen that on farms. And I'd still have a problem with a fire risk. And I go back to everybody else, and it's over intensification. And I have great sympathy with the family. I mean, I think they're doing a wonderful job looking after sisters, children, and elderly parents. I had an elderly mother for a long time, and I know what it's like, the commitment you have to give. And I've got full support for this, but it's not necessarily do we support this, is the house right for them? And I don't think it is, even with this extension. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Faulkner.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've heard enough now, so I'm prepared to put in for a refusal on this. The grounds being that the proposal represents an over-intensive use of the site by virtue of the width and mass of the proposed extensions, which will result in an adverse impact on the street scene, would not be sympathetic to the area, and would fail to protect the amenities of neighbouring properties. It would therefore be contrary to policy D1 of the adopted Melton Local Plan 2018.
Thank you. It's not often I do this, but I think I'm going to second that motion to refuse. I think somebody already said that. I think it might well have been you, Councillor Faulkner, that all that appears to have happened is they've moved the front extension to the rear. And to me, I did some sort of brief measuring out. It does seem to be around about the same size as the previous one. So yes, they have addressed the sort of front and the impact on the street scene, but we still have the over intensification by virtue of the width and the mass of the proposed extension. And I would prefer this to have come back whereby they've retained that side walkway up the side of the garage. Because let's face it, we're going to have people living in here who will need that extra little bit of help. And the only access around the rear of the property is going to be 800mm width, where they keep the storage bins, these sort of refuse bins. So I'm very concerned about this, and I do fully support the motion to refuse. Sadly, we're at this point again, but I would encourage the applicant to come back with a much better plan, and that she can provide the housing and the facilities for her family. Going on from there, Councillor Higgins, do you want to add anything?
No. On the main part, I think you and Councillor Faulkner and other councillors have said it very well. I think just to just probably some wider advice, what you added on, which I thought was very, very relevant. And I think for me is, you know, I'm okay for the site expanding somewhat.
Yep.
I agree with you. I think the walkway is just a little bit too much. I think so. That's probably what's tipping me to the D1 as you've proposed. The other elements I think that you could do with the site, you can consider going into roof spaces. I think also the aspect which faces 44 as well. I think it's near enough there for 30 as well on this one. But just for the applicant as well, there are other options, especially on granny annexes, which just as a project I've been looking at very recently, you can get very building reg friendly, doesn't need planning permission. You can get annexes built, especially in the gardens as well. You can get quite reasonable spaces, which a lot of people are doing to accommodate elderly relatives. But it's separate from the house, but it's in the garden, usually single story, and it gives that person that independence. But equally, the family can come together in the garden, or you can go to your other house. Now, I don't know all the personal circumstances, so I can't comment on that. It's just an option maybe for the applicant to look at. But I think, as you said, in principle, if the design comes back right, I'd be voting for this, because I do very much welcome what the applicant does for her family. It's a great benefit to society when you're looking after, nephews and parents like that. And there are many communities that have intergenerational families and do a very good job at it. And it's nice to see here. Grandparents are a great thing, and they should be celebrated. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to take part in the debate? No. Right, we've had a proposal to refuse. In line with the proposal in front of us represents an over-intensive use of the site by virtue of the width and mass of the proposed extension, resulting in an adverse impact on the street scene. I hope I've got all this down. And it's not sympathetic to the area and would fail to protect the amenities of neighbouring properties, and which is contrary to policy D1 of a local plan. So that is the motion in front of us. It's been proposed and seconded. So I will now go through the list for your vote. First one is Councillor Bindloss. Are you for, against, or abstained from the motion?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Chandler?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Faulkner?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Glancy? For. Councillor Hewson?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Higgins?
For the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes?
For refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Posnett?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Pritchett? You're on mute.
Abstain.
Okay. And Councillor Steadman?
Reluctantly for.
Yeah, that's my view too.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. That application is refused, and hopefully it will come back in a better form, more in line with what the committee expects to see. So thank you very much for that. Right, item 5, urgent business. I don't have any urgent business at the moment, but I presume that every member received the information from Democratic Services indicating that we may very well continue with remote planning meetings for some while yet. And people will be advised as to when we stop it. I think it was this year, but if anybody has any further ideas on that, would you like to confirm that, Natasha? I'm sure I read it was for the duration of this.
That's correct, Councillor Glancy. It's for the remainder of this calendar year, and further updates will be issued towards the end of the year in advance of any change.
Okay, thank you very much. Just thought I'd remind people that's the state of play at the moment. Well, thank you very much, everybody. It is now 9:15, and I'd like to announce